PCC 3 under construction there.
The what?
The PCC 3s. I got some pictures of them under construction or reconstruction at Woodland.
Oh, you mean the resurrection?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some people, Russ, are calling them 3s now.
I got a missive from.
I'll call it 3s too, just like I call a $3 bill.
I got a sudden missive. I sent those pictures into the T people. Okay, I don't even know if they know what the hell they're looking at. Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I got a missive back from them that they have to completely replace the back seat at 3234 and 3265, and they didn't understand how come they got to take out the battery tray. Okay. And they also have to completely replace, because the Brookville passenger doors come as a package.
Oh.
Okay, it's like a door you get for a house. Okay.
Right. Yep.
And they didn't understand that, so they now have to reframe the entire side of the body at 3 points to get the Brookville doors to fit. What the MBTA reminds me of Lieutenant Clouseau in the Pink Panther.
How about
That's
Don
what they're good at.
How about Don Knotts?
Well, all they do is hit walls. Every wall there is, they'll hit it and hit it hard. They're amazing.
Well.
Hey, at least they're trying. They got no alternative now, you know.
Hey, George, is that why when they came to Philadelphia and Boston?
I can give them an alternative. Just go over to overseas, go to Prague and say, I want a half dozen of the cars you're retiring. You'll have something better than what. And the Prague cars by now are all chopper equipped.
Yeah.
And upgraded. Yeah, just bring them over and put them into service.
Well, you know, it's more fun this way.
Yeah, right.
My friend Peter Scheinfeld, between you and me, he used to say, it's too bad that they have people that are retarded who have to work, she said, but sometimes it's fun watching them work. That's kind of the way the MBTA is sometimes, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I remember saying like that from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's one, and I was saying one thing about the retarded, they're fun to watch.
What you gonna do? You know, we got to be careful about talking that way these days. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway,
True,
okay.
I agree. Because, but you do wonder. We used to have a saying at Inepta that if there was a 50-50 chance of getting it right, why do we get it wrong 90% of the time?
Yeah. Well, anyway, as always, it's great to see you, Russ, okay?
Yes, good to see you, George.
Okay. I'll let you go and have other people take a time, okay?
Yeah. I guess people are showing up now. Okay. This is the first time I made this. I lost track of it, and so finally got myself organized.
By the way, I sent the article for what you used to call the tin cans, I believe you called them. The 6000s when they were in Norristown.
Oh, the spam cans.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you called them tin cans at the time, I believe.
Well,
frustrating about it.
You know,
anyway, I did a feature for, it was supposed to be for First and Fastest, and they didn't want to take it because it's not against Chicago. It's about Philadelphia. So I sent the whole thing to the editor for the East Penn Traction. He said he's going to publish it as a series.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I told him if he needs pictures, let me know. I got lots of pictures of the darn things if he needs them.
You know, those turkeys in New York always said that you had to have big 80,000 pound cars because lightweight cars would never stand up to New York service. Yeah. And those 6000s, how long did they last? And when they got on P&W, they were really being run like hell.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, I think they got up to all of about 53 miles an hour or something like that.
Hell no.
How fast did you get them?
You get that thing wound up going down from Bryn Mawr to 69th Street is all downhill.
Okay.
You get those things wound up and they go through the vibration zone.
Yeah.
And go right through it and beyond it. You're getting close to 60.
Okay. I guess I'm wrong because I remember when I was there and what I put in the article was you remember Ted Mills, the supervisor?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ted used to complain that they were dragging the road.
Well,
so that's why I put that in the article, because he was the one that said it. He said when they got
yeah. I mean, compared to a bullet car, yeah.
Well, he said the Bud cars could really fly. The ones they got from the Market Frankfurt, because they wired in the fourth point, and he said those things could fly, but the 6000s are too small. Huh?
The Buds had the trucks off path cars.
Yeah.
And the path cars were a 60-mile-an-hour car.
Okay.
You got a 60-mile-an-hour gear ratio on the path car, so you stick them under a M3, and it's going to go.
Yeah. So if you want, I'll send you the draft of what I sent to him. If you want to review it and see if you see anything seriously has to be changed, or does it matter now?
Well, yeah, it wouldn't hurt because I get tired of seeing. I was just looking at a picture today. Some guy wrote a history on the New York elevateds, a very nice history. And he's got a picture in there of what he calls an elevated track alongside a highway.
Yeah.
It's the Brooklyn approach to the Williamsburg Bridge. And what you're seeing is the streetcar tracks on the approach coming out of Brooklyn with the highway. See, on the Williamsburg, you had 4 tracks.
Yep.
Two lanes for traffic.
Yep.
Yeah. And so what you're looking at is probably from one of the towers looking down on the Brooklyn approach to the Williamsburg. And there's it's very nice because you can see there's 2 streetcar tracks and there's a car in the distance. And then alongside is the highway. And he captions this as elevated tracks alongside a highway.
Oh boy! Wow.
You see enough of that stuff.
Okay.
So
I'll send you that tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. Fine.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing, the New York City gave me a stink today. They blame me for posting some pictures of the R211 online, which I didn't. I didn't even know the photos existed.
The 211.
Yeah, the new cars.
That's the latest order. I've lost track.
Well, it's the same pictures that were published in the bulletin in the February issue. I had nothing to do with that. Okay. But I guess between you and me, what happened was, Randy Glucksman down there at ERA?
Yeah.
He's a member of the MTA board. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And they had them online on the website that he accessed. And then I guess he told, I'm guessing he must have told the ERA it was okay to publish it. And then they wound up getting downloaded. They went online to a forum or something. And somebody from the MTA will police those forum sites, okay? And they said, you can't put this online. We didn't approve that. And then they blamed it on me. I had nothing to do with it. But anyway,
there are people out there that can get very excited about very trivial things.
Yes. Yeah. They got not little to think about. And then today I heard, get this for a quote, our new Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Buttigieg.
I just wrote him a letter asking why in heaven's name we're putting a diesel operation down out of Camden to Glassboro. Oh. And how does this make sense when we're supposedly in a climate crisis?
Well, on the other end, Mr. Buttigieg told the world today that the United States is soon going to be the global leader in high-speed rail, high-speed rail for passenger train. I mean, it's a fine goal, but I think the Union Pacific might have some objectives about that.
Well, I wonder who he's got on his staff.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, that was the first thing they were going to grab at to get the headlines. Okay.
But well, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. Let me let you go. Okay.
Yeah. Good to see you, George.
Same here.
Stay well. I'll probably back out too, so somebody else can get on. I only see 5. Well, there's Bill Greenway.
Bill's one, yeah.
Who else we got?
Yeah, I think we just had the 6 of us so far.
Yeah, I got gallery view. Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're still 20 minutes early. So.
Yeah, it is early.
Well, that's okay. That's the chat session.
Yeah.
When do you have chance otherwise? Managed to get supper in time to do that this time. But been looking at the 420 odd page book on the BMT that Eric is working on. Still with us, George? No.
Which George?
Who are you looking for?
I've been reviewing some of the 422 page plus book on the BMT that Eric is working on.
Oh, when are we going to get it?
Well, as Eric says, when we're satisfied that there are no longer any errors or typos in it. And when you got 400 odd pages, it takes a little while, but it is a hell of a piece of work.
Yes, I know that. He's always very thorough. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the BMT history is so long and complex that it's worth doing right.
Yeah, good.
There's nothing like it, anywhere else. What the BMT did and how things changed.
And I'm sure it's going to make him rich, right? The book is going to make him rich, right?
I don't know how what kind of price you would put on something that big.
Well, I think that's why the ERA is looking for
contribution,
and everything.
Yeah, well,
they had some fairly large inheritance, what you call. You got some
stuff. Bequeathments, yes.
Yeah, and they went through that like nothing.
Well, it took them a few years, but they did.
Yeah. So. Anyway, okay. By the way, your show tonight is on my smartphone. So I'm going to be splitting time with them in the Wisconsin NRHS. I got other talk with them over there. But they're in Central Time, okay?
Yeah, in April, I'm going to I'm going to do a trolleyology one for PTM in April.
Oh, and what's it about?
2 40-minute videos. One will be some magnificent photography on the Westchester line done in 16 millimeter, which is really great to watch. And the other one is my one on riding to McKeesport on Route 56 in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Which was my favorite line.
You'd be amazed how much of that private right-of-way from the old McKeesport is still there. Or at least it's recognizable. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
George, can you hear me?
If you drive from Glenwood Bridge and you drive up that road, up the valley, getting to the high ground, the right-of-way is across the creek from the highway. So it's all still there.
Yep.
The road's never been widened.
Yeah, it has. It has, Russ.
It has now?
You're riding on part of the right-of-way. You can see it at Glenhurst cutting off where Calhoun Park was. It's behind it and it comes around the gas station. And from there, you pretty much can follow it all the way into Richland Cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is grown over considerably, and there's been 1 or 2 sewer projects there.
Yeah, and I'm sure the right of way through Buttermilk Hollow is still there. I don't think that's been developed.
It's still there.
Yeah.
There's a road. I think in parts of it there's a little road on it, but it's so undeveloped.
Yeah.
And the abutments are still there for Buttermilk Hollow, and you pretty much go right through. And where the bridge is under Lebanon Road, then you have to kind of factor in 50 years of erosion, but it's still there.
And what amazed me, typical Pittsburgh, that there was a stop there and a stairway leading down from Lebanon Church Road down into the hollow where the trolley was.
Typical people still living up there today.
Typical Pittsburgh.
Now,
But
Russ,
I love that line. It had so much variety of operation between street running and private right-of-way and running along highways and crossing river. Yeah, I think you had 3 river crossings. And it's one of the few places where you had a grade separated junction on trolley lines, on streetcar lines, at this other side of the bridge where the 98 went down to Glassport. Mm-hmm. So you had a grade separated junction on 2 streetcar lines.
Yeah, the tracks are paved over on West 5th, but they took the paving off to repave it 2 years ago. It's all there.
Yeah,
it's all there. But what I've never seen, Russ, and maybe you can tell me if you ever saw the other way to get into McKeesport was the Route 68 that went past Kennywood and all those steel mills.
Oh yeah, well I have movies on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never see.
We were over there by the mills taking movies of the 68s, and next thing you know, a guard came walking up to us and asked us what the heck we thought we were doing, taking pictures of the steel mill. And we had to explain that we were taking pictures of the streetcars, not the steel mill. He had a hard time believing that, but we convinced him that we weren't doing industrial espionage.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. When I began working at Pat, and I worked in the schedules department, the job was called a checker. We were out there all the time, watching the buses, watching the cars, writing down the information. And they had me, I guess they were trying to figure out just how many people were using the Pat train. And they had us at the different stations. It was about, I don't know when this was, 80, 70, between 75 and 80. Anyway, I'm on the Pat train station in McKeesport. And the mill's right back there, but I'm on public property. I'm a county employee, essentially. And, B&O train would come by, I'd shoot the train, and they used Alcos in the mill. I shoot the next thing you know, there's a guard on the platform. And he's really ready to arrest me. And I'm showing him my pass and telling him I'm working. And he's like, okay, you got a half an hour. I'm coming back and I'm arresting you, unless you're gone. So I called my boss up. I said, I really don't want to be arrested. I'm going to leave. And, my boss had this really deep throated voice. He's like, you stay right there. So the guy came back and a Pat policeman was there. And the Pat policeman went through the Allegheny County Police School. They had arrest powers throughout the county. And I'll tell you, the profanity was exquisite. He told him to get back behind his fence and stay there, or he'll drag him in. And so the guy went back behind the fence, and then a train went by, and I shot a picture and just kind of smiled at him, because what's he going to do? This real cop has threatened to arrest him, but they're like that here. And one time Dave Hamley said he was up on a hill well above ET, well on private property, certainly. And he said they had made a 5-mile detour, the mill police, to get him. And he saw them coming. He saw the car pulling up. He said he switched his film, and they came in and they wanted his film. So he gave him the film and he said, you get out of here. So he had a complete set of Trains magazines, and he photocopied 2 pages. And one was in 1942 when the government said you can't photograph trains. The other one was the day after VJ Day, when all of these restrictions were lifted. And all he did was send these things in and said, be aware, if you're using this law, it has been repealed. Never got an apology, but he got film back. US deal. So you have to wonder why they do that.
Well, some people, when you put a uniform on them, they change, and not for the better.
I don't even know who's running that railroad anymore. It's changed hands a couple times, and
well, it's not where it used to be anymore either. Because I have a slide of this daylight speed. I used to take the daylight speed liner out to McKeesport and finish my trip on the 56. One of the few places where you could do that. Get off the B&O and get on a streetcar and continue your trip into Pittsburgh. And they had that RDC train that ran out of Washington to Pittsburgh with the RDCs. I rode that a couple of times.
I remember the RDCs.
Yeah.
When I started, yeah. We had RDCs. We had a set of
dining compartment.
Yeah.
And the right china.
I think the RDCs were the ones that somebody got on and mysteriously let them go. And they left, I think it was, they left Pittsburgh and they were just flying down a track unattended. And the cops were at all the crossings, blocking the crossings. And they finally hit a coal train that was sitting on a track.
How'd that happen?
We don't know who started it. I think if I remember.
Oh, I see. It ran.
It might have been some labor issues going on the railroad, but anyway, in any case, the RDCs, somebody had gotten in them and started them up and jumped off, and they just ran down the track, and it was at night. It was dark.
Yeah, I don't think they had any dead man on those at that time. We didn't have any dead man. But that was a great ride. Where else could you have dinner in an RDC? You could have breakfast in an RDC out of Philadelphia on the Crusader, the Wall Street, and they would serve food in the morning. And you had to be careful which seat you sat in because every seat was spoken for. And you didn't want to get in the wrong seat. You'd be asked to move because the regular commuters on those two RDC trains were what kept it running. And they had coffee and donut service on the run.
They sound as bad as when I was in college one year. I worked at a bingo. There was a kitchen up in this hall, and each one of us had a floor. And I remember, you would serve food there, but I remember the people not only wanted to sit in the same seat at the same table, they had marked the chairs. God help you if you took their chair.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it, I guess, was if you win something once, that's your lucky chair and this is your lucky spot. And I'll tell you, I saw some fights among senior citizens.
I can believe it. Well, looks like business is picking up slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Been a while.
Yeah. I'm in Baltimore now. I work at Social Security.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here listening to the Patco trains go by. They're so noisy. I can hear them inside my house, which is built like out of 2x8s. And I still hear the trains in my house a quarter mile away. But no comment.
Yeah. Well, I've got a conundrum. I'm trying to figure this out. So this coming trolleyology, I guess a lot of you guys know, there is a woman from Hershey that's going to be doing a show on the Hershey trolleys.
Yes.
It's getting close to Valentine's Day. And Kristen, our volunteer assistant, has me doing a backup show just in case something goes wrong.
Good idea.
I guess there's been times when she's been a little slower to respond than Kristen would like. Kristen's promised me I can do my show at some point. But when you look at I look at the history of Milton Hershey, when you start going over the trolley line, every picture is private right-of-way on the side of the road with corn growing. I can't even find any cows. Yeah. And of course, the dairy business was a big moneymaker. So, I don't know how exciting it's going to be when I do my version of Hershey. How much corn do I want to show?
They have the little electric train that used to run there. They have that train. It exists. It didn't get cut up, but when they rearranged the amusement park, it disappeared. The track got buried. They changed stuff, but the train survived, and they had the train. And I had a bunch of slides taken on it, so I gave them a disc with all my slides, just for their own use. but that was a neat little operation. It ran off a third rail at about 200 volts or something like that.
As always, thank you.
I think it was Ed Blossom.
Yeah.
Ed Blossom told me about it. So on one of my trips to Chicago, I went via Hershey and looked in at that.
Yeah. What I didn't know was Hershey is still an unincorporated town. It has a post office. Reading had a train station, but it is still a part of Derry Township. It's still like a company town.
Derry Township, yep.
Derry Township, but it's really, there is no borders of Hershey, so to speak, like you would have Scranton or Wilkes-Barre or Philadelphia. It's unincorporated as to this day.
Well, he might call it a company town.
It is a company town. It's nicer than the ones where I grew up in the anthracite region, but
well, it certainly smells better.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. You got used to the smell of sulfur after a while. The burning.
Better
dumps,
you than me.
You know, the thing I remember about the burning dumps, and everybody there had in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, the whole area, it's pretty much all wood houses. And my dad would like spend 4 years painting his house. And then he'd have to go back and start all over because all of the sulfur in the air from the burning dumps would just destroy the paint. And I remember in the early 60s, the aluminum siding people came in and they made a killing. Just about every wooden house up there still has aluminum siding.
Well, that's what mine has.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to meddle with it.
No. It stays on there. I have no idea what's going on. Well, we don't own a house anymore now, so the family doesn't. What's the name of the park down near Pottsville? That's what I'm trying to remember.
Anyway,
it
was nice of what you did on Charleroi. I never saw that, so it was nice to see your show on that. A couple of things I missed by a couple of Liberty Bell and the Pittsburgh Interurbans, such as they were. The North Shore, they were not, but they certainly were interesting.
Well, there's parts of that you can see, and there's parts in the last 10 or 12 years they've taken out. Just, again, we built on them.
The pictures, they were not spending a whole lot of money maintaining right away.
No.
In recent times. So definitely was not the North Shore, but it was certainly scenic.
Well, all you had to do was watch a movie that somebody was taken from behind a motorman and one of the older interurbans, and the car was just up and down all over the place. So
yeah,
you know.
But it was the longest PCC line ever built, or operated, I should say. There was nothing else that long. I always say the ultimate fan trip would have been on Illinois Terminal and take a PCC car from St. Louis up to Peoria. That would have been the all-time record.
Oh, God.
If they would agree to it, which I doubt, but it would have been interesting to do that.
What was their track like in the end? I never saw that either.
It was still decent enough to go 50 mile an hour. And they had enough freight to make, they had to spend money on the right of way because they handled enough freight that if you didn't, the track would become inoperable.
Talking a little bit about the upcoming program on Hershey Transit. I may have seen that program a year or so ago, and she talks a lot about the Hershey Transit, but she also talks about a car that Hershey Transit acquired from the interurban line that went from Lebanon down to
oh yeah.
Oh, the effort on Lebanon.
Yeah,
right.
They had several. There were two cars, I think.
There were two, 7 and 8, I think, were the cars. But
yeah, the group that has the car barn the old car barn in Hershey is restoring that Cincinnati built car. And when she had this program, it was about 50% complete. But it was very interesting. So I imagine this program is going to be good again.
Yeah, it'll be worth watching, certainly.
I don't know. Kristen at least first had a hard time. She really wanted to do it in person. We was trying to tell her, you know, with COVID, maybe in person is not what we want to do.
No, I don't think so.
You know, I mean, a lot of our members are old and they don't want to come out. Maybe get sick. Who knows?
That's a ways off yet.
But the other good thing about Zoom is we've been picking up, and I guess you guys have too. We've been picking up a lot of other people from other museums, and
Mike,
members that just can't make it into Pittsburgh to see a program.
One here from North Carolina again.
Yeah.
This.
Love this.
good thing you showed up, Mike.
I had a situation with the Montgomery County book a couple years ago when about 65 people showed up at the Upper Moreland Township building to see a presentation about it. And I didn't bring my projector because they said, oh, we have a built-in system. You just have to plug into it. We tried everything. It failed. It wouldn't show. And I had to stand up in front of this group and say, I'm really sorry, and someone got a woman said, can't you just talk? I'm like, it's gonna be boring if I just talk.
You could sing a little.
Yeah.
6 months later, people came back and the show did happen. It was rescheduled. But after that, I always bring my projector. Always.
Yeah.
Keep it in the car if I have to, with a spare bulb.
Belt and suspenders.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mike, I was program director back in the 70s and early 80s, and that's what I learned to do with slide projectors and all the things that went wrong. And to this day, I never get rid of my old projector when I bought a newer one. I still have the older one, and I do need to buy an extra bulb. I understand they're expensive, but
maybe got a spare. I even tried it out. I even tried out the spare, just
but
make sure it wasn't.
I mean, I cringe, and of course I use an Apple laptop, and I use their software, which is Keynote, which is very forgiving for photographs. It's not like working with a real PowerPoint. So, but even when somebody says, oh yeah, my Apple's here, don't worry, you don't need this. I'll even bring a screen sometime.
Good idea.
The screen's right over there in the corner. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what'd you do, Mike? Did you find there was one click? I've often found that there's one click I haven't found. And
it's like everything else. I just Googled it and spent about half an hour. And the thing I plugged in, or the thing I typed in, was Zoom cuts off bottom of PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, okay.
Had that problem.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I've never used PowerPoint. I prefer just to use JPEGs, and you can get any quality you want that way, and it's good enough for what we're doing. You don't need the fanciness of PowerPoint.
No, I don't use most of what PowerPoint has, like all those templates and stuff like that. No, the screen basically the photograph fills the entire screen with a little caption at the bottom.
Yeah.
I've seen presentations where people had really good stuff, and the PowerPoint or the PowerPoint template had like two pictures like sort of superimposed, and they used that template. So these fantastic historic photos are being shown, and they're the size of postage stamps. And I can't even see the stuff because PowerPoint.
Yep.
Well, you don't need the templates.
No.
I mean, Apple Keynote, I just create a blank slide with a blue background and throw the picture.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I do. Yeah.
Right.
And it works real nice. But the nice thing about Keynote, when I worked with PowerPoint once and I was trying to rearrange photographs that Ed Leibarger had done, every time I moved something, I had to wait for the entire program to rearrange.
Oof.
In an Apple Keynote, there's a bar up and down. And I just move things and it's boom, like that. And Apple built that specifically for photograph shows, I guess.
You can do that with PowerPoint, though I like Keynote too. But you can move things around in PowerPoint in the left without having to rearrange everything.
Hey, there's Tom Picarillo.
Yeah, here he is.
How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How's everybody else?
Okay. What? Have you read all those books behind you?
I can't tell who's talking.
It's Rich Allman.
He wrote them.
Oh, hi, Rich.
No, all those books behind you. Have you read all of them?
3 times. What are you working on?
What am I working on?
Yeah. You know, by the way, I can't see your video.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm working on an Atlantic City Broliner, and getting the wheels
Does it run?
under the skirting is a challenge.
Did you get it going?
I got
Is it
it's
running
it's
on
doing
your
fine.
layout?
Okay, the right turns are working. The no, I'm sorry. The left turns are working. I have to tweak a little more on the right. So stay tuned.
It's like riding a bike, isn't it?
Well, yeah, as long as you don't make any right turns, it's all good. I had a much easier time learning how to ride a bike. What are you working on?
Mostly lighting, lighting the railroad for nighttime. I got all the blue lights up, and I've been equipping all the buildings with LEDs and lighting like that. I found a China source of lights that are really cheap and really good stuff off of eBay, you know. So I'm waiting for the next shipment coming, and that's mostly what I'm working on. I scratch built 3 motors, freight motors, over the past over the past year, and I think you've seen some of those in the newsletter.
Some guys who, you know, when you go into the few hobby shops remaining, they're very, very busy. I think with people in lockdown, people are doing a lot of this kind of project.
Bob Dietrich, hello there.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Like you bought a 22-year-old car and you drove it, and then the transmission went kaflooey. That's what happened. You drove it.
The issue, Your Honor, if you allow me for a second, I just want to mention that there's no way for me to prove that it was smog, that it had a smog certificate.
Can someone have that conversation on
California DMV?
Hey, Doug, where's your glass of wine?
I have a martini.
Oh.
Hey, Doug, did you ever find those plans you were looking for Atlantic City?
Ed's got them for me.
Trolley Talk number 80?
Trolley Talk number 80. I got a copy of it on the way to me.
By the way, I got all kinds of Trolley Talks over here. I've got probably 3 different collections. So if anybody is looking to pick up a set, you know, contact me.
Well, I have, you know, I got that Philadelphia and Westchester car that you put on eBay.
Yeah.
And I finally have all the parts to finish putting it together.
Good.
I got a Q card drive for it. Huh?
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, but I got a copy on the way to me. So yeah, that's
Bob, I'd like to ask you a question.
Okay.
Did you ever hear a song called Pawn Shop on the Corner?
Yeah. Pawn shop on the corner. No. There's a pawn shop on the corner.
That's the one next to the Four Seasons Landscaping. Yeah.
Pawn shop on the corner in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
I've known that song since I was a kid. And
don't sing it.
I recently thought of it and thought of you.
No. I'm not sure I like this.
So many ways.
Yeah. Whenever I think of porn, I think of Bob.
Thanks, Doug.
What was your joke about the porn and the Cheetos, Tom?
Oh, geez. Yeah, you remember that one, huh? I won't broadcast that now.
Rich, I thought you were the doctor that was asking questions why it was orange.
Yeah. Yeah. why are my genitals orange? I don't know. What do? I eat Cheetos and watch porn.
Right.
Oh
boy.
The other car that I've been with the Atlantic City one that I've been a little bit obsessing about is the Fort Wayne cars. Apparently they got 6 of them. They hated them. They only ran like 1 or 2 summers. But I've been thinking about trying to do one of those sometime. I don't know how.
You could scratch build it.
I need to scratch that. Well, it's a very simple design. Yeah, it's very similar to AJ's Johnstown. It was similar to, it was a 42 foot St. Louis car. It's just the ends were different.
Didn't Atlantic City have warboard cars?
They did.
Yeah, they did. They did.
The Atlantic City and Wilkes-Barre.
Yes.
Yeah.
And others.
And Philadelphia?
They were supposed to get them, but they were diverted.
Maybe Staten Island had them too.
Yeah. Wilkes-Barre bought 2 or 3 groups.
They had the most.
I don't think Philly wanted them after the war, and they went back to the government, and the government sold them to sold some at least to Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah, Wilkes-Barre had the most of them. Atlantic City had what? They had about, I don't know how many.
Cox's early electric car books gives a more detailed disposition for all of them. Cox's Streetcars of Philadelphia has a preliminary list, but his later book found more news and also mentioned companies that ordered duplicates directly from Brill. Plus, they got resold. Some of the Atlantic City cars were 3rd or 4th hand. That is, remember the one in the Trolley Museum of New York has 3rd rail shoe brackets on one of its trucks?
Yeah, it's from running in Rockaway.
Yes. Remember, only half of the original order of roar boards went to PRT. The other half went to the Philadelphia Railways.
Yeah, there's Fort Wayne cars that you mentioned. I think one of those was sitting in Tannsboro for a while.
Yeah, it's 250. That's now up in Connecticut, supposedly to be rebuilt, but of course they ran out of money. And hopefully it's covered enough so that it doesn't go the way of the Queensboro Bridge car. But it did wind up in Connecticut, New London, or wherever it was that the guy's rebuilding a Type 5 up there. For this.
Besides the one at Brantford.
Yes, but it's in Guilford, Connecticut, even
Guilford,
though
yeah.
owns it.
Yeah, it's Bruce Thane's place, but he's dead now, and I forget who got the property for after he died. But that's where 250 is supposedly to be someday rebuilt.
Is that Warehouse Point? Or
Excuse?
No.
That Warehouse Point or a different museum?
Not a museum. It's a shop that rebuilds cars.
Oh.
And they're rebuilding a Type 5 for the Boston guys right now. But
is that the one at Brantford that BSRA owns?
The one that was at Brantford.
It was at Brantford for a while, and it went to Guilford for rebuilding. I don't know where. I don't know what their plans are, where it's going to go once it's complete.
They have to move it to Virginia at Thane's new shop when he opens it up.
Bruce is dead.
No, not Thane. The other guy he's at the Pennsylvania Trolley. What's his name? The guy that's doing 8042. The guy, he's at Arden. No, at Arden. No, he replaced Thane. Thane's shop was in Guilford, right?
Yeah.
When he died, the wife decided not to keep it.
Well, somebody
So-
else is running it now, and they're rebuilding the Type 5.
Yeah, I can't think of his name, but he's also working at 8042 at Western Pennsylvania.
Oh, well, he could, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's also done work for Railways to Yesterday.
Yeah, it could be.
And he did work for Electric City, this Scranton 324.
He's going to have his own shop
Yeah.
in Virginia. I think he's taking a lot of the facilities that used to be at Bruce Thane's facility. He's moving them to Virginia.
Oh,
but
okay.
he's
George,
delayed by the coronavirus.
George, where's 5706 being restored?
What's that?
Where's 5706 being restored? The BSRA car.
Right. For the time being, it's at Bruce Thane's old shop in Guilford.
Okay.
Yeah,
but it has to get moved to Virginia to get fixed by the other guy.
Yeah, if he's relocating, then the cars have to go with him.
Yes.
So
they're now they're expecting it'll be back about 2026 or 7.
So who's gonna ship 250 down to Virginia?
The BSRA, they've already got the funds for it. That's already
250?
baked into the budget.
250?
No, 5706.
I'm talking about 250. Who's going to move that to Virginia?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, that's why I say, who's going to move that to Virginia?
No idea.
If you don't want it to get there, send it through the mail.
Well, in theory, it's owned by the Trolley Museum in New York. They're the owners of it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked the question.
That's why TMNY, I think, barely has 2 pennies to rub together.
Yeah, I understand that. It's a sad story. I know those people from the very beginning, so it's a very sad story.
I think our show is starting.
Because they couldn't really survive the environment. They couldn't survive the environment at Branford. They had to have their own museum.
Hi, Bruce. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
That was interesting.
That was Bruce Harvey.
Yeah, that's his map.
What's the map? Is that Philly?
Like a map of PTC, but
is that 2424?
Like a 2424 sort of, or
yeah, it looks like a PRT map because it shows the routes but not the streets.
Yeah, that's I think 1938.
Yeah, well, 2424 is the official track map of the system.
You know, speaking of maps, I just came across a website called openrailwaymap.org. Now, maybe you're all familiar with that, but I found it very interesting. You can zoom in on railway lines, both present and past, all around the world. It's openrailwaymap.org, and you ought to take a look at it. And you all know about historicaerials.com. We can go back in time and see the tracks coming and going in the facilities and so forth. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, how about this openrailwaymap.org? You've all heard of that too?
No. Yeah.
No.
It's brand new. It's quite good. It'll open up on Europe, but then you just, scroll around and you can zoom right in on, well, in my case, New Jersey, but in your case, it shows all the railway lines on the map. Pretty good.
What was the other one about aerial views?
One with the aerial views was Historic Aerials.
Thank you.
AERIALS, historicaerials.com. You put in Philadelphia, PA, and click on View Image, and you can go 2020, 2008, 1954, 1947, and at the same spot, and it'll just keep overlapping the old arrangements with the new ones. And you see tracks coming and going and car barns coming and going, and it's very interesting. There's also topographical maps on there and shows the lines. And there was a line up through Millburn, New Jersey, never knew existed. And when you go there and you take a look, you see where all the tracks ran and where the car barns were, and it's really fascinating.
Tom, do you have to pay for that service?
HistoricAerials.com.
Tom, I'm on that now. Do you have to pay for that?
Only
No.
if you want to buy a
Oh, if
map.
you want extra features.
Okay. Because it asked me for my email and my password.
Go to on that website.
The other one was openrailwaymap.org. You want to jot these down.
Thank you.
And for this area, there is Penn Pilot. I have to get, I forget the exact name of the URL, but University of Pennsylvania, and I'm sorry, Penn State University and State College has a lot of aerial photo maps. Most of them are from the 1930s.
And one thing that's incredibly cool about historic aerials is you can bring two different years on the screen at one time, and you can wipe across the image and see how it changed from 1954 to 2012.
Agree.
You know, see the transformation. It's quite a it's quite an application.
Hey Tom, how far back do those maps go? Do you have an idea?
The earliest ones I've seen are 1931.
31. Okay.
Now 31, the resolution is not great at all, and it's quite blurry images. But you know, you can and based upon where you go, if you go to remote areas, again, I'm in New Jersey. If you go to a remote area of New Jersey, it might only go back as far as 1954, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But starting
so
around
after the interurban era, yeah.
Pretty much.
But the geodetic survey maps on that same site go back to about 1889, right. And some of them show trolley lines in the country.
Well, you'll just have to get over there and start poking around.
Yeah.
You know, there's a home page, and you click on View Images, and you'll go to a different page, and you enter the city and the state. And
you can even enter a street address or intersection.
And you hit go, and it brings you right. It'll bring you to an atlas view with a map, and then you go down the columns, and you pick whether you want to see aerials or you want to see topographic maps. You can overlay it with street maps of today's street maps, so that you don't lose your bearings. And it's quite interesting. Find out about railroads that existed, didn't know existed.
Another resource is Philly GeoHist, which has Philadelphia real estate and fire insurance atlases, and some of them show trolley tracks or horse car tracks. Almost all of them show railroad tracks. The fire insurance ones especially give incredible details about car barns.
Also, the Sanborn maps, if you can find them.
Yes, the site I just mentioned has Philadelphia Sanborn maps, or some of them. But the Library of Congress and other sites have a much better collection of Sanborn fire insurance maps. But Sanborn doesn't show trolley tracks in the streets very well. Bromley, a competitor, does. Although not for all of their years.
Where do you find the Bromley maps?
For the Philadelphia area, Philly history. Let me bring up the entire URL and I'll get back.
Oh, that's called philageohistory.org.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Alan, that same philageohistory.org, there's 1928 aerials on there for the entire southeastern Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Oh, yes.
And so a lot of the lines were still in service. Again, it's not the sharpest. And it's also, it's funny, it says circa 1928, and I was, the Philadelphia Map Society before COVID would meet a couple of times a year. And the curator of the Free Library, who made that 1928 map available, I was talking to him about it, and I called it the 1928 map, and he's like, circa 1928. There's no date on it. You know, he was he was very meticulous about things like that, and he's right. But I believe 28.
The first part of that Phila what?
History? It's PHILAGEO, then history.
Thank you.
.org. Actually, the Athenaeum on Washington Square, that's the organization that has this giant scanner.
Wow.
And I asked them if I could put something through it, and they could, and I would, they'd also have a copy then for their library. And they said, that'll be $75. I said, but I'm letting you scan it. Like, oh, no. Okay.
Oh, geez. Yeah, because I have a couple of atlases at home from 53 and 54 that go beyond the extent of their atlases, and if they want, yeah, it's not right. If they want stuff, yeah, they shouldn't be charging people.
Obviously, they didn't. Yeah.
Well,
John Gallagher, I see you're here. We're usually at your place in February. What's the refreshments tonight?
Where's John?
John's on mute.
Right over there. He's on
here.
mute.
I'm just not answering.
Well, then go mute yourself.
Oh, there.
Is that on a vice council, John?
This crowd's getting rough. I don't want to catch anything.
Actually, New Jersey water is just fine.
Yeah.
Could these links be posted in a section on the East Penn website?
Yeah, send it to Adam.
Yeah. What I was thinking about is maybe sending your information to George, and maybe we can put it in the newsletter too.
I wanted to pop by and say hello. I have something else I got to go do. So have a happy New Year, guys.
Hey, same to you, man.
Same to you,
Thanks,
Tom.
Tom, once we're all vaccinated, we'll take a ride up there.
Yeah, I look forward to having the company.
Okay.
We'll do a session
just
that we'll all have fun at, okay?
Just don't make me organize it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, somebody's got to. You got all the connections, Bob. All right, we'll see you guys. I got to go.
Bye.
Oh, it got quiet.
Why?
Because he left.
Quiet.
Oh.
Well, now we could talk about him.
Well, that's normal. Why do you leave?
Well, that's what we say at East Penn. If you can't say something nice about someone, sit down, let's talk a while. Hey, Michael.
Back to the sites. Everybody's going to PhiladelphiaHistory.com, right? PhillyHistory.com. There's a whole bunch of old photos in there that you can look from a map, and sometimes there also are old maps on there.
That's PhillyHistory.org.
Right.
PHILLY history.
Right.
So there's two different sites, so they're both great in their own way.
Yeah.
But then there's the other one, the PhilaGeo, that basically has these various maps, and you can sort of superimpose different ones. You can bring up different ones. So you can sort of look at like a current street map plus like an equivalent of a Sanborn map, or I think they maybe have some of the transit maps there. So
what they did is they got an intern to georeference all those old maps.
Yeah.
It gets updated a lot. So you might see different photos different times you go there.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to visit it every 3 months to see what showed up.
You're right. What happens is the company that got the contract from the city, they'll get grant money now and then, and they'll have some poor college student just scan 8x10s for for weeks straight, and then they'll update the site. That's how it works. I was talking to the guy who owns the company. It's like a hit or miss thing. But yeah, they've only scratched the surface of the photos. There's like God knows how many more they haven't put up yet. So you're right. Keep checking back and see what they've scanned.
They get someone to be a grunt, huh?
For instance, they have about 150 photos showing the cutover between the old and the new subway at 24th and Market.
Oh, Facebook page.
Which site is that, Jim?
PhillyHistory.org. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it PHILLY?
You guys can use the chat to put up the URLs.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But the phillyhistory.org basically has the city's archives photo collection on there. And
Right.
somebody did it that they geolocated or so these things. So you can put in like an intersection and it'll find all the photos in the city's archives. But
Yeah,
a lot of the city photos were only taken in conjunction of some project. So you'll see like there's tons of photos with the subway extension, the subway surface tunnel extension, because that was a major city project. And you'll see like a lot of pictures in East Oak Lane because they took a lot of pictures when they put sewers in like the late 30s. But then other places in the city, you won't really see anything.
I found a really fascinating series of pictures at the Upper Roxborough Reservoir. And they did some work up there right around 1900, 1910. Yeah. And it looks like there was electrified trolley track running around that construction site. They never show you what the motive power was, but there were little four-wheel carts and it was temporary track with overhead wire. I'd never heard of that before. That was very close to the RT&L's Roxborough car barn. It was almost in the back of the car barn.
Thank you.
If you go to phillyhistory.org and click on the map up in that area, there's a bunch of pictures. It's really fascinating.
Two other intriguing ones. There's one picture of a trolley wire and track on the Roosevelt Boulevard Bridge at 7th and Wyoming. In other words, the branch to the dump.
Wow, neat. The dump that ended up being the disaster of Logan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another series of pictures titled Darby Line, just Darby Line Elevated or Darby Line Subway. That was to be an extension of the Center City subways out Woodland Avenue, but the way it got to 42nd and Woodland is rather complicated. If you go by the pictures, it was apparently to cross the Schuylkill River at Sansom Street and then run under Chestnut Street to 42nd and then down to Woodland. That site also has photographs of a few of Merritt Taylor's maps from the teens, showing various rearrangements of the Locust and Arch Street subways.
Yeah. What site is that again? I'm sorry.
The phillyhistory.org.
Oh, really? Merritt Taylor maps. Okay.
I put the URLs in the chat.
Right.
The second one.
Did you know that the Locust Street subway was actually built east of 8th Street? That is in the 700 block of Locust. And that had to be abandoned when the curve was made that the Patco trains now use.
Yeah, part of the loop.
Yeah. There are pictures of the 13th and Arch Street subway station under construction, and also of the various Locust Street subway stations back when they were built 40 years before they went into service.
Well, they were built for L cars, so they had to rebuild them for 10-foot subway cars.
Yeah, that Locust Street subway, that was supposed to go to West Philly.
Yes.
In fact, even the signals were labeled WP.
One of the versions had the Ben Franklin Bridge trains running down 5th Street to Locust. That was the 19-teens version. So the Locust Street subway would have the Delaware River Bridge trains, but via 5th Street, because 8th Street in that version was the Darby Line subway via Walnut Street. And an Arch Street subway and a Market Street subway.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of ambitious plans.
There was a paper published back in 1985. I think it was called Philadelphia Rapid Transit History from 1885 to 1985. And that goes through all kinds of different plans they have for rapid transit in the city. For instance, they had lines going up to Roxborough and
yes, Parkway, 29th Street, Henry Avenue.
Yes, and
Alan, who put out that paper?
I'm not sure. I'd have to take a look at it.
Do you have a copy?
Yes, but I can't get to it right now. But at sometime later, I'll get it out.
I think it's on the internet somewhere, or else another version.
But you also had a Lehigh Avenue L that would have been the Frankfurt L.
And I'm sorry, the name of it was what?
I don't know the exact name, but it's generally Philadelphia transit history from 1885 to 1985. It may be just transit history, or it may be rapid transit history.
Thank you.
And by the way, I guess when they built the Broad Street subway, they built short extensions for the Northeast subway and the Northwest subway. And one time on a fan trip, they powered those, and they ran on that trip. They ran the train up both extensions. I guess they go maybe about a block or so, and they built those spurs so that when they would have built the actual lines, it wouldn't have interfered with the Broad Street operation.
Well, they're great separated junctions.
There's also a cutout down passing up for an extension too. If you're looking through the tunnel, you can see a cutout right after what's it like Federal Street or one of those streets down there, right at Passyunk Avenue. There's a cutout in the wall where they easily could put a switch in or cross over to go to a 2-track subway that go down Passyunk Avenue.
Yes, between Tasker Morris and Snyder.
Yeah.
You notice that the Broad Street subway between South Street and Snyder Avenue is built as the east half of a 2-track subway. I'm sorry, of a 4-track subway.
Right.
Yeah.
To be extended to a 4-track subway at some future time, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, Jimmy, I'm going to change the subject and ask the question. What happened to, it just escaped my head. Jimmy McHugh's photos?
I don't know the answer. I would suspect that his son knows.
Well, yeah, I actually went up there and took a look at him. I thumbed through all the books, but he told me they were sold.
I don't know the answer, and I have not talked to him.
Yeah, okay. I just wonder if maybe anybody else might know.
Yeah, I remember, among other things, Jimmy got Steve McGuire's Pennsylvania collection.
Not the negatives. He got the prints, but not the negatives.
Oh.
McGuire's negative collection, I think, is at Rutgers.
Really?
Yeah. Now, I think it was not very well taken care of. I don't think the negatives were in individual envelopes or anything.
Oh, yeah, but it was a donation. They're going to take care of it. It's another one of those. Yeah. And if you want a copy of a print, we'll charge you $25 for it.
Yeah. Well, you can't do it until they get some college interns to work for peanuts to organize it.
Well, that won't happen anymore if minimum wage goes up above $1.
Don't you guys keep picking on colleges? I get a little sensitive about that.
We're not picking on colleges. We're picking on.
Okay, John, we'll talk.
We'll pick on you instead, John. We'll pick on all guys.
I mean, heck, okay. I got paid $5,000 a year at Ohio State And they paid all my tuition and fees, and I had faculty rights, not student rights, but faculty rights. And it was great. College students.
I'm still paying off my college loan.
I paid mine off with the GI Bill. It pays to serve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Or to be a football player if you're going to Ohio State. That's when you get the best deal.
I paid to go to college when it was $900 a semester, and those were out-of-state rates.
You're still paying for it, right?
Yeah.
All right, it's about time to start. It's a little past 8.
I was able to pay my Penn State loans off in 3 years.
George, Steve's trying to start the meeting.
Yeah.
We got a pretty good presentation tonight, so we want to, make sure you got enough time to do it justice. I want to welcome everybody to the February Zoom meeting for East Penn Traction Club. Also want to have a special shout out to all people who are visiting us today from faraway lands, other clubs. Welcome. And also want to have a safety briefing with everybody to make sure that, we wash your hands, you wear your mask, and get the COVID vaccine when you get a chance, when your number's up or whatever. But it's very important so we can get rid of this scourge and we can all meet together once again. And with that, our meet is for, it's no longer in May, it's going to be in October, 7th, 8th, and 9th. We are scheduled to be in Allentown on those dates. So hopefully everything is going to be okay during that time so we can meet up again in person. Also, I want to mention the passing of Donald Grant, one of our East Penn members, very good miler and awesome guy in general. What else? Yeah, we talked about the meet. Charlie, we have a treasurer's report?
Yes. Yeah, do it. We have $235.52 in the cash account, $3,609.06 in the checking account, $18,927.81 in the money market account, and $1.14 in the PayPal account, for a total of $22,773.53.
Great. And how about the calendars? We have an update on those?
Yeah, the calendars have done very well. We're down to about 30 of them is all we have, because we did have a reduced number printed.
Great.
So financially, we've done very good.
That's good news. I guess everybody is, working on their trolley projects when we're in this COVID times. Pretty sure a lot of people here have stories about what they're working on, and perhaps if you want to share what you're doing, you can have an article in a newsletter for everybody, or even join a Zoom meeting and have a clinic perhaps. So all ideas that we can have while we're waiting for this thing to pass. All right, any prototype news? Got to be something.
Well, I don't know what's going on with SEPTA's Route 15, but all of the wire is up on the east end, all the way to the new loop at Richmond Westmoreland and around it.
So I've been seeing some pictures on Facebook for restorations of those cars that are occurring, I guess, down at the Woodland shop.
Yes. I've looked at the rails because I'm wondering if there will be one test car set up there to test the alignment of the wire. I don't think that's...
Is anybody going out to the Allegheny Loop? Is anything going on around there?
I just said all of the wire is up.
Yeah. But as far as I know, the last time I was there a couple weeks ago, that basically it looks like everything's complete, but the buses are all still the buses are still detouring by way of Aramingo Avenue, even though you can drive up and down Richmond Street. So I don't know what's going on.
There's still a bit more paving to do here and there.
Yeah.
Put down the top coat.
Wasn't there also paving on the 10?
Yes, but other than somebody else will have to give the details. Trolley track doesn't seem to last as long as it did when I was young.
Well, they're doing this hybrid, I guess, gauge panel, concrete gauge panel with asphalt side panels.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a recipe for problems later on.
Yeah. I can remember back in the mid-1950s, new track on Lansdowne Avenue, apparently to replace the original from the 1890s, and now they're replacing it again.
Plus the Kawasaki's are heavy. They're heavier than a Hog Island car.
Oh.
That doesn't wear out the rail.
Okay. Any model news? I'm seeing some new interurbans on Shapeways. I know there was which was it? The Laurel Line cars. Somebody's selling a pair of those on eBay.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you?
Yeah.
Oh,
I have
good.
all scales: N scale, HO scale, and O scale.
Ah.
George Gula bought some of the HO cars.
They look good.
They are. They're excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's in a more of an obscure line, and it it's more railroad than trolley, so it has its fans, and but not everyone. But typically, the problem with all trolleys that they're indigenous to one particular area, not that universal rather. I think I saw probably Mr. Creativity here for trying different things. Volkmar, he's been coming up with some interesting ideas.
Yeah.
He was his latest one were a combination of printed car components with laser cut car components as a way to get things done faster. And the one thing I was concerned about the laser cut sides out of wood was getting a good surface finish when you're done, so you didn't have a lot of grain and stuff. And he just tried pre-painting them before he laser cut them. And so he says he's got good surface out of it that way. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there. There was an LA car that came out of what was it, West Coast?
That's AJ Shear. Yeah, AJ's been coming out with stuff pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So
he's on a roll.
He says, however, he does not, with his 3D printing, he has not been able to find a good recipe for his CAD drawing, I should say, for railroad type roof.
For what?
A railroad type roof. Hi, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tougher. But we got a good railroad roof.
The Volkmar has, and your Laureline car did too.
Yeah, the HO car had a really good roof. And I think it just depends how it was printed. I believe that was printed vertically.
Wow.
So I wonder if it's the orientation of his printing. If you look at the cross section trying to do it horizontally, not going to work. But if you do it vertically, you can get it to print. Because you have a cross section there that you can deposit material on without any helper pieces to hold it in place while you're trying to print.
Yeah.
Something a little different on eBay. It's a Pitman trolley with scale wheels, but decaled for Boston's Metropolitan Transit. Yeah.
Oh, you'll see those cars painted in a bunch of different ways. I've seen Interstate Indiana Railroad, Dayton. I mean, how many of those are around? I mean, they made those things by literally the barrelfuls of parts. Because at the end, they had a barrel full of those kits, or at least parts of those kits still around. And that barrel is still in existence. Maybe not as deeply filled as it was before, but they made a lot of those. Double truck freights and the passenger unit. I mean, look at all the cars back in the 50s, the articles in the magazines where people were kit bashing them and making them longer, making them shorter. I had somebody made an Easton College Hill car from a Pitman car, and so they shortened it up. You see them as combines. Dave Cope took half a passenger side with half of a freight motor side and put them together and made a big, huge, long combo interurban. That was one of his good running cars that he always had out. But yeah, there's a lot of those around, and they still keep turning up.
Plus, somebody made a deck roof to replace the arch roof.
Oh, on the passenger car? Yeah, that was Bowser did that. That allowed them to keep making those cars for a while. I asked them if they had any more of those roofs around, and they go, no. And which is the indication of you won't see them again. Somebody bought a remaining box full. I have no idea where they ended up, or they just used them all up themselves. They were great. Beautiful, injection molded too. Anyway, I'm waiting for Mike to get started. I'll hop off.
Has anybody seen the new underfloor HO truck from Tenshoto?
No, have they? Is it on a website somewhere?
I saw it on Hobby Search.
Okay.
They only have one size, but they have taken reservations for two more different sizes.
Is it a scaled down version of something like GHB's drive or a Stanton?
It looks like a Stanton drive.
Is it good for a double truck car or only a single truck car?
It's a double truck.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I haven't ordered one yet, so I can't guarantee that.
Well, I'll tell you, Tenshoto has been around for a long time. My gosh, they were back there, post World War II or maybe even earlier, making trains
and switch machines.
Oh, everything. I mean, their trains is a small part of their operation.
There's a guy on eBay. He's selling Soviet type trolleys, streetcars, trams, whatever we call them. I got 2 work trams off of him. They're pretty nice. They have a cab in the front and they have like a gondola in the back. Real nice setup. It was easy to put together, but of course it's not motorized, so you have to figure out a way to get it motorized.
This is HO?
Yes.
Europeans are doing quite a lot. You'll find some independent builders. You'll find websites. it's funny. I got an email from a guy on Shapeways who had a variety of car bodies, and he stuck with HO because he says it's a defined gauge. But when you got to O scale, he said, okay, so I made a body. What do I make it to? 143rd, 148, 150. And he quoted another one. He said, so I just don't bother with it. He said it's too difficult. And also we have the scale up problem. You can print nicely in HO, but when you go to O scale, you know, you've got to go to a different process, and it just doesn't come out with the surface that you want to
yeah, you can't do a one piece.
Something else I picked up, and boy, is it heavy. Now I'm trying to find out if there was a real one. I suspect it's Baldwin Model Locomotive Works molds reworked.
Oh, one of those old bronze doorstops.
Yes.
Yeah, all those guys are building stuff in bronze. The loco guys would do it because they need the weight up in the engine.
Yeah,
but when you try to make streetcars there, it's tough.
Yeah. I thought it was a nice paint job, and luckily nobody else liked it.
Okay, Steve, take it over.
Okay. News. All right. Let's start with Mike's fabulous presentation. Mike, you're good to go.
All righty. See if I can fire this thing up.
Fired up Charlie.
One of the issues is...
You want us muted, Mike?
Everybody please mute and shut off your video so we can get some bandwidth here.
Charlie, you're the host. You mute everyone.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
When we share screen, we have no way of knowing what kind of device viewers are looking through, whether laptop or large screen or potentially even phone. So I'm going to try to share here, and hopefully this is I've got a notification host disabled participant screen sharing, so it's got to be freed up, I guess.
Charlie, you need to go on the security settings and allow other people to share their screen. Then Mike can get on.
I think this one.
Go to the security button.
Security button.
And there it'll say allow others to share screen. Then Mike will.
Sure. Oh, okay. Now I see the security. Let's see. Oh, I think. Looks like. I think it's working, right?
Mike is on now.
Yeah.
Looking reasonable. You can see the whole screen.
Yes.
The bottom's not cut off.
Signed
Perfect.
copies available at Mike Zagali's Square site.
Signed copies. All right, I'm going to. This presentation obviously can't be the same as what's in the book. If you see a little star in the lower left corner, that means that the image is in the book. I threw a couple other things in as well. Obviously, the captions in this presentation are abbreviated. The book has better captions. In fact, with both books, I blew right past their maximum word count. They warn you that they'll reject your manuscript if you're over. And I was well over, but they published it. You know, I tried to put worthwhile material in the captions. I did a lot of research. I mean, aside from the books that are already published, I went into old newspapers, and I just now counted up how many newspaper clippings I got. I have 250 of them. And that's not all, I'm sure. But what I did is I took that information, which was fresh in my mind as I was writing the book, and I sprinkled it through the captions, you know, because the book's not really necessarily, you know, an exhaustive history of the lines. Those are already published. These are almost like a photographic, you know, accompanying volume, you could say. The first book I dedicated to the memory of Harry Fazig, who wrote the Montgomery County book. So it seemed fitting to dedicate this book to the memory of Barker Gummery, who co-wrote the Bucks County book, as well as many other books. He was an excellent transit historian. He had his, he's actually Barker Gummery IV. He comes from a long line of prominent New Jersey people. Like his great uncle was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Trenton, like around 1900. And here he is in Australia. I included this photograph so that people can understand how these lines ran in most places. You know, in towns, they were in the center of the street. So I made this drawing using Department of Highways standards. So the drawing is to scale. You know, it's like an 18-foot wide ribbon of concrete. And you have the car lines running along the sides. In most cases, I mean, there's three ways. You could either be in the center of the street, in the shoulder, or you could run like a railroad. The map tries to differentiate at least two of those. This map's broken into obviously two pieces in the book. The caption probably should have stressed there are no railroads on this map. Even looking at the system coming out of Trenton, it was really impressive. There were 120 route miles in Bucks County, 140 in Montgomery. So just between those two counties, there was 260 miles of lines. And I divided the book up into chapters, kind of by company. This was the PRT. This was the Pennsylvania and New Jersey. This was the Trenton, Bristol, and Philadelphia. The Doylestown and Easton and LVT. And we devote a chapter at the end to Buckingham. One, PRT. This is, you know, this photo's been published many places, but it's such a great photo. I didn't restrict the book only to photos that have never been seen before, because the book also hopefully will appeal to the common person who's interested in local history. But I did try to find the best print. This was the destination on the first day, about 1.5 miles south of town. The sign was actually saved. It's at the Mercer Museum. This was quite a landmark in its day. It was torn down in 1916. This just shows you how they draped the car line on the landscape. You know, probably by the 1920s, they'd come through here and they would do some earthwork, put a concrete road in. And at that time, the car line would be told, you're gonna rebuild your tracks. And they had to come up with the money to do that. And that forced a lot of them out of business. In this case though, on 6/11, the PRT did actually relocate the tracks. This picture's been published elsewhere also, but it's a reasonably sharp copy. This is the town of Edison. Edison has been totally erased from the face of the earth by Department of Highways. What we call Edison now, which is 1 mile south, it was actually the town of Bridgepoint. Edison itself is no more. This is Bridgepoint with the with catenary overhead, and that's the freight station. That's the bridge at Bridgepoint, since torn down. I love the way things were advertised in the old days. The hyperbole was excellent. I mean, acknowledged to be the finest trolley ride, like what, in the state? Finest in the US? No, this is acknowledged to be the finest trolley ride in existence. And also the problem of wire thieves was everywhere early on. It's like more than 1/4 mile of wire was taken that night, and it would shut them down for at least a couple of days till it was restored. This is a very common problem. Here's an old Department of Highways blueprint that I got from the Bucks County Recorder of Deeds, and I jazzed it up a little so it's a little more legible. I put bigger labels on it, and the rails were barely visible, so I darkened them up. Everything in the book, I took into account the size that it's going to be printed at. I mean, the problem with Arcadia books is stuff's kind of small. And this is also in that same area. There's almost nothing left of this line. And here's this beautiful piece of curved rail put in when they concreted the road in 1920. The bridge would have been behind you. The bridge is gone now. Just this little apron is here. And fortunately, the township manager told me that her work crews are under strict orders not to pave over this, which is a good thing. Another view. There's a photo I got from the Mercer Museum. I shouldn't get it. I bought the rights to it. I liked it on the back of it. It called the line the Newville Toboggan. Newville was at Bristol Road at the top of 611. You can only imagine the kind of ride that the early four-wheel cars gave you, especially on the poor track. The PRT bought the whole line and upgraded it extensively. This is from the Free Library of Philadelphia. And this is the interior of that car. Another view along the line. A little further south was the car barn. These are the Arnold Brothers series of Bucks County postcards. They went around the county. They took hundreds of fantastic photos. And here's a picture of the car barn. Of course, 611 squeezing over that little bridge there. Now it's a 4-lane highway. Another view of the Paul Valley car barn power plant. Still stands, still there on 611 between Bristol or between Street Road and County Line. There's the date stone. And the Free Library had this picture of the interior. The Free Library also had a picture of the coal car. They didn't have any railroad siding up there at Paul Valley, so this thing had to make endless trips back and forth from the Trenton Cutoff in Upper Moreland, hauling coal to the power plant. Kind of a neat photo. Didn't make the book, but it shows how wide open the country was in between towns, like most of the county. This is good for before and after. Brace yourselves. Here's today, so much better. We had, and at the time, if there was a toll house, which there was there, the car line just kind of went around it. Here's the same location with a much sharper photo. And the refrigerated milk car that provided service on that line. Found this just recently, nice color postcard of where those freight trolleys ended up, or a lot of them. There were several freight terminals in North Philly, or at least two. And this was the main freight terminal at Market Street. This line had just about every kind of trolley on it. Every couple of years, the PRT would swap out the fleet. And at the very end, the line folded in 31. For 5 years, they ran these big double-end 5200 series cars. They had modified the doors specially so that you could open any particular door because the car line was right on a concrete highway. You had to really, really watch your step getting on and off. So this way the motorman could, or the operator, there's no conductor, the operator could open the door on the safer side. And one of the drawbacks of the Arcadia books is they're black and white. And this illustration I did started out in color. The yellow might be a little bold. I think it's supposed to be cream. I can fine tune that. And this is what took the place of the finally 1931 of the electric cars. Next chapter, Pennsylvania and New Jersey. It's a pretty neat picture in New Hope. New Hope Historical Society occupies that building on the right now. And we were just talking about the McGuire stuff. And sure enough, Jim McHugh was so kind as to lend me the print. for the book. The first trolley car in Bucks County, from the Reading station up into Langhorne, ran a little shuttle, 1.5 mile shuttle. Then the line was extended and cars like this came into service. Those are pretty uneven wheels there. Those maximum traction trucks there, or something else? Little 4-wheel car in the town of Steubenville. That house still stands. And the track is at an angle there because it's crossing from one side of the street to the other. This was the desolate countryside in between Newtown and Doylestown. The Bristol cars use this line, Bristol to Newtown to Doylestown. And this trolley is about to be retired. It's already pretty worn out in this picture. There's the end of the line in Bristol. We're standing on the tracks of the Trenton, Philadelphia line, which actually did not connect. I've seen this picture printed in different places, but Newtown Historical had a not great, but a better print than I've ever seen of this. You could really read the sign. Newtown Historical was really generous. They spent like a whole day there scanning all the stuff. They didn't, they just brought me piles and piles of old photos, and it was really a day well spent. This was in the Barker Gummery's collection out at PTM, an early bus. I mean, the roads weren't even paved then. You can imagine what this was like riding this. I mean, couldn't have been comfortable. It beat walking, but probably not by much. I can't even tell the propulsion mechanism. Is it electric? Is it battery powered? Is it kind of early? Is it steam? I have no way of knowing. Can't tell. It might be gasoline powered. So if it rains, you can pull down the side curtains and you can sweat and not be able to see out. Newtown Historical, they had this photograph. I'm like, that's the Battle of Langhorne. That's been written up everywhere. We know about it, but there's an actual photograph of it happening, which is incredible. They didn't know what it was. So I was able to let them know. You can see that the trolley underneath the arch there. I mean, the Pennsy wouldn't let them squeeze underneath their arch. What happened eventually is you can see the cables. They flipped that trolley onto its side during this battle. The Pennsy had hired German and Irish laborers. They're up top there, and the car line had hired Sicilian immigrants. So the way Barker Gummery put it in the Bucks County book, he said the fight was enlivened by cursing in 3 languages. These are the sort of problems that happen anytime there's a trolley war. It's pretty common. But the fact that a photograph of this thing existed for 120 years in a drawer is just, I thought it was fantastic. This has also been often published, this postcard, but this is from a print at Wycombe. I took a 1928 aerial that I got off of philogeohistory.org, and I added relevant stuff to it. You can see that the line was actually straightened out in 1908. It went curving around a farmer's field. And then in 1912, they rebuilt the bridge. You can see that the stone part, they were anticipating double track at some point. That never happened. You can see all that timber. And here's another view of the timber. It's not in the book because it's kind of blurry, but imagine what that sounded like. So 1912, that was replaced with what we have remnants of today. It's on private property. The Wrightstown Township Historical Society organized a walk, talked to all the property owners, and we walked one end of the township to the other looking for remnants of trolley. Obviously, this is the best thing that's still there. In many places, it's completely gone. It can be standing right there and you don't see anything. This is how that line actually entered Doylestown. What's interesting is on the right side now, Mercer's big concrete castle is here. And clearly this is before that was constructed. And it also shows you how, just the way it was done with the cartway and the rail. This picture's not in the book, and it really should be. I got a even blurrier print of this from Langhorne Historical, and it was so blurry I couldn't use it. But Andy had given me a print of this years ago, which I had misplaced. If I had been more organized, this would have been in the book also, because this is how the Bristol cars entered Doylestown. You can see the church in the background. Later, a switch was put in, and there was a Union terminal on the courthouse block for Easton trolleys, Willow Grove trolleys, and Bristol trolleys. There's a charter, which is going to head all the way into Trenton, where they'll change cars for Lawrenceville. Pretty neat picture there at the car barn, Lincoln Avenue. You can see on the right the little office and the little, there's a clock built into the wall above the door. There's a corrugated shack built onto the front of it. And this is a pretty cool picture. Again, Newtown Historical had it. I didn't put their names here, but the caption in the book has all their names. This has been printed before, but it's such a great picture. I had to include it in the book. Also, it's a sharp print. And Newtown Historical had the names of the owner of the Packard and his passenger. So it's fun to put that in the caption. And this picture, they apologized to me. They said, "Oh, you're not going to want this picture. It's terrible." And I said, "Are you kidding? We don't have any pictures like this of a modern Pearlie Thomas lightweight car, which only ran here for 2 years, just zipping through the countryside." These were painted red. So it started in Trenton and it went all the way, No, this one started in Bristol. This was the Bristol to Doylestown line, and the Trenton to Newtown line was separate. So if you were standing at that corner or at the Union Trolley Terminal in Doylestown, the Easton cars were the big old original wood and steel cars. The Philly cars would have been those bright orange double end cars. But these were the best cars, actually, the ones that took you to Bristol. These are the most modern. And they only ran for 2 years. Color postcards are nice. New Hope. Another one. See, these kind of postcards are great because they're all hand tinted, which is fantastic, but it also gives you great detail on how the rail was laid out. So when I do the maps, I try to find as many photos as possible because I could not find any actual maps of this layout, but that shows you really clearly. And also that the artists would kind of hand-handedly do things to these pictures, like put people in at the wrong scale or some hokey looking trolley. But those rails, I don't think those are faked. And this is my map, studying the old Sanborns, trying to find where the freight station was. There's reference to a freight station in newspaper articles built in 1915. And I'm pretty sure that's the building. The timing is right and just the angle is right. This is the end of the line, Lambertville. Going over the bridge. And even this picture, I just like it. Yeah, the shutter hung open too long, but it's still a neat picture. There's people outside the building on the right. And also, I was able to look it up, the building still stands. 1502 River Road. Yardley was also a nice visit. Yardley Historical. I got good photographs there. There's Yardley. This big freight motor, number 60, that plied these lines, started in Trenton and then went on these lines. When they were done with the freight service in the mid-20s, they sold this car to Hershey Transit, and they actually motored the thing all the way to Hershey. Gives you an idea of how extensive the network still was in 1924. There's a map of Yardley. The power plant in this picture actually provided trolley power in a pretty big area from Bristol to Doylestown to New Hope, and then it also powered the the Princeton short line cars all the way to Princeton. And it was downgraded to a substation in later years. And it was put there because you had your endless supply of coal on the canal. Picture of Newtown. I think we've seen this one before. The Grundy Library were also very generous. Morrisville. I like this picture of Morrisville. I mean, you can see the rails. This is a very sharp picture of Morrisville that actually was on the Duke University's website. And by this time, the wires were down, but it gives you a real good view of the rails. There's a pretty funny kink in it. If you're coming from the right side and you're making your right turn, just interesting looking at the geometry of the rails. Calhoun Street Bridge, you know, fantastic old historic bridge. Had trolleys on the south side, so every other trolley was bucking traffic. This also happened to be the Lincoln Highway. And this is my map of Morrisville. And that logo there is the logo that was painted on the side of the Pearlie Thomas cars when they bought them in 1921, Pennsylvania New Jersey Railway. Again, there's more pictures in these chapters in the book. Obviously, I couldn't put everything in here. This is the Trenton, Bristol, and Philadelphia line. This is just a fantastic picture. So if you took the Route 66 double-end car up to the city line, the rails continued to cross because the freight trolleys continued. And you would walk across the bridge and board the car that took you to your next town. Most people didn't go all the way to Trenton. They could. That inn back there was absolutely historic. Red Lion Inn. It's a shame it burned down, I think in the 1980s or 90s. Again, I had like kind of iffy quality prints, and Rob Homolka was very kind to me. He said, "Oh, I've got the best, you know, real photo postcard of that. You can scan it." And I tried to do that whenever possible. And of course, give people credit. It's a sharp photo. He also had this postcard. This is called the S-Bend. Francis Industrial School for Boys is at right. I-95 is on the left side now. You can see the kind of crenulated top on that stone wall there. That's still there. You know, it's about the only thing you'd recognize. This is the joint trolley and road bridge that the trolley company built in 1896. They're very fortunate that the ice didn't take that bridge down. By 1912, the bridge had such serious rust that the county embargoed the line and wouldn't let trolleys cross it. And when I was at the Mercer Museum, I found the blueprints that the engineer actually drew to fix the bridge, to show what new steel work was required. And that's in the book. The powerhouse. It's been torn down, of course. You're standing on the Pennsy right here, the bridge over the Neshaminy Creek. And this is kind of a famous story, but for 7 years they were held up. And in 1897, the Young Bill was going to extend the right of eminent domain to the electric railways, and it failed. And an Allentown newspaper said that the railroads must have had too much boodle. I'm like, what's boodle? Apparently it's like bribe money. I didn't know that. So the railroads saw to it that the electric lines would not have, or the trolley lines would not have eminent domain. So for 7 years, the Pennsy on one side and then Mr. Gaw on the other put like a half-mile gap in the Philadelphia to Bristol line. And a law was passed, I guess a state law giving elevated railroads the right of eminent domain. It's like 1902 or something, when it was built, I guess, to help with the construction of the Market Street L. So the people who were building this line realized, hey, we'll make an L. So when they first tried to do it and left for the weekend, you know, the Pennsy Sanac guys with sledgehammers and smashed it up. But they came back and they built it. Apparently this section here, there's no ramp going up to it, but the line was built. Also, the the private line that ran up Frankfurt Avenue before the city bought it in 1926, Frankfurt, Tacony, and Holmesburg, they teamed up with the Bristol Trolley Company, and they ran through trolleys, which made a lot of sense. So you would not have to stand at that bridge at City Line. They ran all the way through for many years. Same location. There's not that many pictures I could find of Bristol's old town hall. You can see it on the left there, that tower on the left with the dome that's been torn down. Just a neat picture. And across the street from it was the office of the Philadelphia, Bristol, Trenton Trolley Company. They bought modern cars in 1914, which was good for World War II. They still provided lousy service during World War II, apparently. I mean, not II, World War I. They just had power problems and all sorts of problems. They're also buying and selling equipment constantly. By 1920, these cars had been sold off. And I could not find any pictures of these cars in service, except this one, the colorized postcard. Clearly, it's that trolley or one of those 5. And those houses still stand. Steamboats were still an option at this time, 19 teens, 20s. I just love the old postcards. These hand-tinted cards, just beautiful. Most of them are actually German. This is the sort of picture I would get by going to the little local historical societies and just sitting down and talking to people. Bensalem Township Historical had this picture. Bristol Pike at Cornwells Avenue. Vandergrift Cemetery is still there. There's the girl standing there watching the photographer. It's a neat picture. It also proves that the car line in Bensalem Township was in the center of Bristol Pike all the way up, for miles and miles. Usually you only saw that in a town. Ordinarily, in a township like this, you would have it in the shoulder. And it was thought that, in prior books, that when they concreted the road in the 20s, that's when they moved the track to the center, but that's not the case. This line, for whatever reason, they built it in the center of the street, even before it was concreted from the beginning. It's another great old picture. This is near the S Bend. This is the kind of picture that it's not in any book that I could find. Bensalem Township Historical had this. I mean, these, yeah, it's a decent picture. Not perfect, but you can see a person walking in the distance there around the bend. Gives you a sense of the feel of what things were like. Also, the Sanborn maps. I mean, there's the trolley freight house. It's nobody's thought about that in a long time. And the newspaper article from the year that they built this, well, they rebuilt it. They bought an old warehouse of some kind and they repurposed it. Talks about that they got permission from Borough Council to put in a switch and a siding. Of course, Sanborn map doesn't show any of that. The Bromley map might. I got to keep looking. Ed Springer let me scan this wonderful old PRT drawing showing the Bristol Freight Service, which ran until about 1920, when Minton shut down the freight service. PRT, Frankfurt, Tacony, Holmesburg, Trenton, Bristol, and Philadelphia. So the trolley ran on all 3 lines. And if you go a little closer, you can see the quality of the draftsmanship. I started out as a board draftsman, and I just really admire this kind of work. Also, the medium is linen. It's Columbia cloth. It's actually very fine linen with sizing on it. When I started drafting, an old draftsman showed me what this stuff is like. He took an old blueprint, which is actually the original Vine Street Expressway, which they never built because it was like 8 lanes wide. This incredible, dense blueprint with red lines for existing and black for proposed. It was just thick with ink. And he got a bucket of bleach and he crumpled it up and he put it in there and he mixed it around. And later in the day we came back and you pull it out and it's pure, like really fine linen. The sizing, the ink had all just disappeared. But it was interesting. The line to Easton's pretty famous. able to trace every bit of this line because I got the old highway department drawings. We know exactly where this line ran. Neat picture. Again, these real photo postcards. This is Plumsteadville. I mean, look at the detail. And the back, it's all German. You know, this is a Pennsylvania German area traditionally. And this Mr. Kratz, he had a very successful carriage building operation in Plumsteadville. His high quality, lightweight, rugged carts, you know, were sold all over the East Coast and even in Canada. They're pretty legendary. And he had 50 skilled laborers working in his factory, starting like the 1880s. He's nowhere near a railroad. So everything, all the wood, everything had to be dragged to Plumsteadville, you know, in one of those carts and manufactured. So he wanted the trolley line built to put the place on the map. And he invested $100,000 of his own money, $3 billion equivalent today. And he lived to a ripe old age. He was kind of a legendary character. Here's part of that Doylestown and Easton line when it was built, and I was able to find the present day location. Took a little doing. You know, it's a bypassed section of 611. But that's it. And this is a great card. This has also been published or printed many times, but it's so great. Full of Indian relics, can be seen by calling on James Emery. The highway department ripped this building down early on, like in the 30s. I like the back of this particular card. Dear cousin, I have had the auto fever bad of late, but the trouble is the medicine is too expensive. Noah. Steve Cohen was also really generous to me. He let me scan a bunch of stuff of his. The Washington Card Collectors Club was the source of this. And I found this too. He said, I think there's a trolley in there. Well, yeah, that's the hay car. It's number 101. It was built strictly to haul hay up the line. There it is today. This is also often published, but Nockamixon or Tohickon Park, you can kind of see it in the distance there. That was their low-key attraction out in the country. It shows you how the line went through Kittnersville. There's an ice pond right there, and you can see the conveyor, the ice house. And this is my map that I put together showing the car line running through Kittnersville. In this case, it really helped to put the LiDAR-derived hillshade terrain on the map. In some cases, it's relatively flat and it doesn't matter, but in this case, I think it really helped. More detail. The mill race and all the things that were important to a town 100 years ago. This also has been published before in Regalsville, which is at the very top. You know, if Bucks County's diamond shaped, this is at the very top. And I'd seen awful versions of this before. And this isn't super clear, but you know, Steve Cohen had the best card I've ever seen of this scene right here. It's so neat. You can see the bricks in the house on the right. So I was happy to get the opportunity to scan this. And this picture, Dave Drinkhouse found this picture. This is right up at the county line. Dave Drinkhouse of Easton, he loved this line. Sadly, he died about a year or two ago. He devoted like 20 years after he retired to researching the Doylestown and Easton. And he said he knocked on the door of a house and somebody said, oh, you want to see this picture? This thing. So this is actually like some crappy inkjet print. I don't know what happened to the original. Actually, what would happen is Mr. Drinkhouse, when he was lent pictures, he would put them on a photocopier and then return them. He never really got them scanned. And I don't know where he got them. But this picture is still worth, I think, you know, it's got the bicyclists, which were huge in the 1890s, huge. It was estimated there was 3 million cyclists in the 1890s. And then when the autos came on the scene, it just fell off the cliff. Suddenly people lost interest. And this also fantastic card. I mean, you're in Northampton County, and you're looking south into Bucks County. You know, that's classic like trolley stuff right there. You know, that's no Class 1 locomotive's going to navigate those rails. Neat picture. Okay, LBT. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because there's a lot of LBT stuff out there. But this is also a neat picture. One of their two, what they call duplex cars, barrel cars. The sides rolled up into the pockets in the ceiling. This is interesting. This has also been published before, but I dug into every name and every history I could find. And the sad thing about Mr. Straub, Granville Straub, is that he took his own life right when Prohibition passed. This was his business. And he went, in the back, with a firearm, and that was the end of that. And I learned that from the old newspaper articles, just digging through. So every all sorts of laws have unintended consequences. Really neat picture. James Mann made this drawing. I asked for permission to use it in the book, and he said QNB has the rights to it. So I contacted QNB, and they let me, kindly let me use the image because it's really cool. This car barn was not in operation very long, maybe 5 years, because inside it had a whole maze of tracks inside, and it was made for very short cars. The building is doing great today. Trolley Barn Public Market. The interior space is pretty fabulous. So that's a good. The story's got a good ending. Percy Park and Highland Park, the two towns are together in Bucks County. They weren't parks the way we think of them. They were camp meetings. They were serious evangelical camps, which still exist. They predated the trolleys. The trolleys served them, and they still exist to this day. They're both in the National Register of Historic Places. There's Highland Park in Sellersville, and there's Percy Park. I love this card because that's home delivery on the right. It says Litt Brothers Philadelphia on the right. So I guess, whatever the goods were came out either on the train or the trolley freight. And then the guy there, he's got 1 or 2 kids in there with him. That's the last mile delivery in those days. I love this card. This is not in the book, but it's just such a neat card. Old Bethlehem Pike, south of Quakertown, like the people in the front yard. And this line, this lasted to the very end. This was the high speed line in 1951. You'd still have a trolley coming over the crest of that hill facing the wrong way 50 years later. Pretty neat. This building still stands also. The apartment house now. This is my map of Telford, Sellersville, Percy. It shows the later and the earlier alignments. This is a pretty neat graphic showing the new cars. Rich Hill, this building survived until about, 3 years ago. It was an apartment house and there was a fire and it was torn down. It's a shame because it's a pretty neat building. And that's the last run, the very last run of the Philadelphia division. And devote the last chapter of the book to Buckingham. Some credits. People were very, very kind in offering up their collections. These are the organizations I worked with. Only one of which actually charged dollars for rights to pictures. Everyone else is like, oh, just use it, which is awesome. And we lost Mr. McHugh and Dave Drinkhouse, both as the book was at the printers. They're both very generous with their, with everything, all the history that they had.
put that website on the chat so we can copy it?
Hold on, I'm going to try to turn this off. Now that it's going, I can't stop it. Little fat swaller for all our David Lynch fans out there.
Mike, when you were doing your research, were you able to find car colors?
No. No, the old postcards were hand tinted at the whim of whoever was doing the work. So, yeah, I don't, that's, unless someone had done prior research, like the actual, I didn't put it in this publication, but the actual book tells people exactly what the two prior books are that I recommend. You know, one is the Cox book on Bucks County, and they may have something in it. And the other is Barker Gummery's book, which doesn't cover the whole county, but it does a great job of covering the lower half of the county. Came out in 1966. I forget the name, but I do, you know, I do refer people to those books. Oh, it's called the Trenton Princeton Traction Company, Pennsylvania and New Jersey Railway. So it covers both the PA and the Jersey side. Came out in 1966. It's a really, really good book. It has, it has the whole real story rather than jumping around showing pictures like this book does.
Any of the pictures that Bill Watts had taken, he always put the car color on the negative jacket.
Oh, interesting. And the negatives of Watts's are out at PTM?
Yeah.
What always fascinates me is that you could get on your Bucks County trolley, and with the exception of a couple water courses where you might need a ferry, you could go all the way to Maine electrically. Think about it.
There was a trip around 1910 that started in upstate New York and ended up in Kentucky, and it was like some electric railway. People actually organized it, and it was written up in the papers. Like it was the longest continuous trip that I know that was actually done.
The longest trip was from Hudson, New York, just south of Albany, and from there you would go to Chicago.
Okay.
Mike, that book that you referred to ran from Utica to Louisville. There's a book on it. Its name is The Longest Interurban Charter. It was written around 1988.
Yeah, really? Charter. Yeah.
I gotta look that up.
The longest interurban charter. If you want me to go get the author's name, I'll do that. Otherwise, the title might suffice.
Was that blackmail?
And it's published by a motor bus society.
Yeah, I have a copy.
Yeah, look that up.
There was
if you go into the journals and stuff like that, you will find a variety of those trips done 20s, 30s, maybe even before, of big, long interurban trips that guys took.
Mm.
And
my grandfather did New York, did Boston to New York.
Yep, you could do that one.
There was a charter from Boston to New York and a book about it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the records show that the parlor car that Branford has made trips all the way down to New York and maybe to Boston.
Wow.
There was a book out, Trolley to Maine, a honeymoon trolley trip that started from Wilmington, Delaware, went through Philly, up to Maine.
Yeah, you could do that.
Mike, we were muted, but your show was fabulous.
You'd have to ferry across the Hudson, of course.
And marry the right person.
But I'll tell you this, you guys, about Mike's book. My wife, believe it or not, loved reading it. So he was aiming to get people who were history oriented, and he did it very well. Because my wife doesn't read trolley books very often, but she loved Mike's book.
Thanks for saying so. That's what I was hoping. And you found a couple good things in there as well about like the what that test car might have been doing with the catenary in Bucks County.
Yeah, they used to do various things. They used to test the rail bonds at the joints because you had to have the welded bonds on each side, or some of them were mechanically clamped. And they would keep an eye on that, and you could make measurements across the joint and see how well the conductivity was across the rail joint. And believe me, if you've been on Pittsburgh Railway's right of way, or remembering the Branford trackage in the early days, when the rail bonds were gone, you just ate the plates and bolts right away. You have to see that to believe it. And they ran on that stuff until the end.
Sir, I enjoyed your book very much. Do you have any other future books under your belt?
I don't. I took a job. I took a project manager job with the Schuylkill River Greenways a couple months back, and they own and maintain the Schuylkill River Trail from Pottstown to Reading, and they're building it all the way to Pottsville and Frackville. Wow. And it's that job is I'm glad I took it. It's a challenge on like a dozen different fronts at once. So like the guy who had been doing it for like 25 years retired, and it's interesting. Actually, you know, there's what's interesting is it follows mostly the Pennsy Schuylkill division, and Conrail actually gave them long stretches of the right of way. The Greenway owns big pieces of it, but there's places where you need easements, and where, you know, there's places in Berks County where Reading and Blue Mountain runs on the Pennsy, and you can't use it there. So you got to find some other way around. It's an interesting job. We also, unfortunately, had a shooting on the trail in Reading last month, which was pretty horrible. The man didn't die, but that's fortunate. So now we're out there and we're trying to figure out how to get cameras installed and what else we can do. There's, you know, it's a long distance trail. It's a great trail. I love it. I've used it, you know, since its inception. It started in little pieces and it's growing, but that's got me really occupied. I got to focus on it.
Mike, your presentation was excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and your research was.
Unmute yourself, John.
You muted yourself, John. Lower left.
Thanks for the compliment. Thank you.
This way.
Yeah, all around.
Yeah, Mike, excellent work and extensive research, and I understand the kind of diligence it takes to do that, but I can expect that you loved every minute of it.
Oh, that's the truth. I mean, it wasn't work at all. It was, I met so many great people. I mean, most people are just, like, when I went to Nockamixon Township Historical Society, they lived nowhere, way up near Regalsville, and a couple times on Tuesday nights. And one time they said, oh, we got this box of stuff. It was just donated. And they're digging through all these old pictures. And there's a picture from 1921 of 611 being paved with concrete. And there's the car line right there. I mean, the guy's like standing on the car line. There's no trolley in the picture, but it's just, you know, I happened to be there, and they're like, oh, put it in the scanner. It's like, yeah, you know, the concrete is so new, it's actually shiny, you know, it's like wet. It's reflecting the other equipment in the picture. So it was a lot of fun, honestly.
I'll be ordering your book, and one of the things that I loved about it is not only the trolley pictures and that for modeling purposes, but the buildings around them and the details on the buildings, the kind of signs that were up, the kinds of businesses. And I was just completely blown away about the trolley hauling hay. That is something I never would have thought of.
The hay car, yeah. Well, yeah. Horses were so incredibly important all the way up until the 20s, because they were really part of everyday life, and you had to feed them things, and they just so I've heard it referred to as an energy landscape. Like you had to have ways of delivering all that straw all the time, or storing it and getting it to the stables. So the fact that the car 101 was built by Brill just for that, it's kind of not surprising. I'm surprised more weren't built. Because you
Red
had
Arrow.
I thought Red Arrow had one.
Yes, the Red Arrow picture shows a double cab flat car loaded with hay.
Okay.
If you go to Baltimore, Maryland today, you'll find people selling vegetables, particularly watermelon, from horse-drawn carts. They're called Arabists. And from what I've seen, every one of them is black. I don't know where they got the Arabist. And again, horses.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not necessary anymore, but this is part of the culture.
Yeah.
Didn't the Phoenixville and Stratford line have one of the hay cars?
I don't know. That line was supposed to be extended from Spring City, all the way to Pottstown. And that's why the Linfield line was built to the Schuylkill River. And recently, I found a drawing by the Schuylkill Navigation that showed where the trolley company wanted to put their piers to cross the Schuylkill. They never got the money to do it, but now at least we know where they were going to do it. It's kind of interesting. It was going to jump over the canal, or at that point it might have just been navigation like Slackwater, but also would have to jump over the Pennsy. So this was a drawing where they had shaded in the locations. And that's, again, a little puzzle piece falls into place. But they actually bought two big suburban cars for that, Pottstown and Phoenixville, which were never, they just ended up going up and down High Street, which was not what they were made for.
Those cars were intended to go to Stratford.
Has anybody ever thought of modeling a hay car?
Actually, I think, I have one. It was a Pittman conversion, no less.
Okay.
Just the ends, the roof, and a floor. Ta-da! There you have it.
Go for it, Russ.
I got thousands of feet of film to occupy my time.
Maybe we should have that as a category in the contest at the meet.
Yeah, hay cars.
Hay cars.
Could be a future theme, meat theme.
Well, the hay cars.
Strange trolley cars for strange uses.
Yeah.
Right. Jim, was it you that said that they expected that Phoenixville and Stratford line to actually go to Stratford? I don't know, Mike, was it you that pointed me to that one map where it shows it going around Valley Forge Park?
Oh, yeah.
And actually going like through a tunnel or under something?
Yeah, it's in the Montgomery County book. I redrafted it.
That's where I saw it. I thought so. Yeah.
King of Prussia, it was going to be a split. It was some cars are going to go to Bridgeport, Norristown, and other ones were going to go down to Stratford. And I don't know if they were standard gauge, but they could have maybe even envisioned what the LVT did, where you run your cars all the way to Upper Darby. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wasn't one of the Pottstown trolley lines standard gauge?
Yeah, that very one. The High Street line.
All right, there's the answer.
Yeah.
But the letterboards on the cars said Phoenixville, Valley Forge, and Stratford at one time.
That was the other company, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it was going to link up with the Pottstown and Phoenixville.
Speaking of extensions, is the Philadelphia Western extension to Valley Forge Mall, whatever, King of Prussia Mall, is that BS or is that a good prospect?
Some consultant is making more money right now on it. They're doing another study.
I remember working
against... No, that's not true, Jim.
They're
well beyond studies on it.
No, Alan. No. They are very close to getting formal approval of the proposed route.
Yeah.
And then you just got to go for funding. But I think they finished their environmental impact statement.
Yeah.
All right.
But then you got to get $1 billion or so, which of course today isn't a lot of money anymore anyway.
There's a, on the internet, there was a simulation graphic of a aerial view or drone view of the proposed line. And it's very expensive. A lot of it's elevated.
But that's the American way. You build it all for automobiles, and then later on you want to put public transit in. It costs a fortune.
Exactly. But the point
what
is,
else is new?
This is not the cost of reactivating the 15 Girard. I mean, this is big money.
It is, yeah.
Is SEPTA rebuilding the PCC2s for 15 Girard, or is that a smokescreen to abandonment?
Yeah, they are building them. Work in progress.
So they 15
internet
Girards.
Photos of cars well stripped and being rebuilt at Woodland Shops.
Will the line come back then?
Well, like Route 23, they've put in new rail and wire.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that all of the wire is up over the Ute track as far as the new loop at Richmond Westmoreland.
When I was working at Gannett Fleming in the early 1980s, there was I remember going past this table and this guy had all these USGS quads out, and he had tools and he was carving an alignment through the mountains of Pennsylvania. And he said, this is the maglev line from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. I said, wow, they're going to build it? He goes, no, every couple of years they put the money up and we come up with a new alignment, and then that's it. It was 40 years ago.
They're making a lot of noise about a Baltimore to Washington maglev, 40 miles or so, part of it underground. The local people hate it. Local governments hate it. But the argument is this is going to get us Washington to New York City in 1 hour. Oof. And that impresses a lot of people.
Yeah, but, that one goes under Philly too.
Well, hopefully there'd be a stop in Philly, of course. But
yeah, but it's going underground.
Well, yeah. And obviously under the Hudson River and under Manhattan. But we already have 2 separate rail lines, B&O in Pennsylvania, from Washington to Baltimore. And they want to put a 3rd one in. Oh, and it will cost $80 a ride.
Yeah.
Estimated. It costs $8 each way on the commuter train.
Did I hear you say 80?
80.
80.
That's the estimated price.
Well, let me tell you, when I go to Philly to shoot trolley pictures, that's a lot of cheese sticks.
You're not kidding.
And you that's get a bag of chips with it.
Yeah, a bag of chips.
Washington to Baltimore.
But the governor of Maryland is very highway oriented. He was a real estate lawyer. He wants to add 4 lanes to the Beltway and I-270 and I-95 and so forth. What's interesting is going from Frederick, Maryland to the Beltway, they're looking at $40 or $50 each way during rush hour. Multiply that by 250 days times 2 is 500. So you're looking at a sizable piece of change. I don't know who can afford that.
You just put it on your expenses.
Right. True. They'll pay it.
Some lawyer.
Well, there's not that many lawyers in Frederick, Maryland, I suspect.
Well, a couple of years ago, I paid $40 to ride Excel from Baltimore to Washington, and only squeezed off like 15 or 20 minutes off the schedule.
Well, that's why I take a commuter train.
Commuter train was $5.
Well, a little bit more. So I think it's $8 now.
Still not a bad ride for an hour or so.
No.
Here with my geezer pass, it's free.
I don't know if does Easy Pass work on the train?
No, my geezer pass.
No, geezer pass does.
Okay.
The geezer pass is only good in Pennsylvania. You don't have that in Maryland.
Yeah.
Speaking of big projects, back in 1910, there was that Chicago to New York electric airline thing that there's all this publicity about, and how they're going to build it to very strict standards as far as grades and curves. I don't know how they're going to get through the Appalachian Mountains.
Tunnels.
But
isn't that what the P&W was supposed to be part of?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, that was Philadelphia to St. Louis.
Oh.
And San Francisco.
Yeah, that was all part of a whole bunch of railroads that to circumvent the ICC and make it transcontinental. I believe that was Jay Gould. That
it was a Jay Gould venture.
Are you sure? I thought it was George Gould, his son. Jay Gould had the idea of a transcontinental, but the man who executed it and wound up bankrupting himself was George Gould.
Okay.
He the Western Pacific.
Yeah, Alan, that might have been because it was like late 1890s, early first decade of the 20th century.
Well, the famous airline that never got built was poorly conceived and poorly engineered, because what they didn't seem to know intelligently was that if you're going to run electrically, you have plenty of horsepower and you don't need to worry much about grades. And they spend a bloody fortune on the first bit they built, eliminating a grade through a hollow, spending all sorts of money, which an electric railway would bother doing. You would keep it above the flood level, but it was ridiculous to be leveling it. Now, straightening it is important. Leveling it is not. And for example, all the high-speed lines in Europe, you will find have recognized that, and they go up grades 2 or 3% without any problem. But if you have a bunch of freight railroaders involved, they're going to flatten it out. It's going to cost a bloody fortune. So the whole thing wasn't very well thought out, and it didn't get anywhere.
You know, the picture I showed you of the Langhorne, the Battle of Langhorne going underneath the Pennsy Trenton cutoff right there. There's 2 Trenton cutoffs there. There's 5 mile long parallel Trenton cutoffs. The original from, I guess, the 1880s. And then 10, 15 years later, they built an entire second one, including a long bridge over in Chamonix Creek, a huge bridge, because they wanted to lower the grade from 0.5% to 0.3.
Yeah, well, you know, if you're going to run mile-long freight trains, that's one thing. But if you're going to build a high-speed MU operation,
that's different.
You don't sweat that stuff, and you're just wasting money.
But ironically, the Japanese who started the movement insisted, at least with the first Shinkansen lines, to build tunnels and bridges and grading, very flat right of way. And I think it was the French with the TGV that recognized just what you are saying, that you can go up and down. You just can't go left and right. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Alan, could you lower your camera just a little bit? All we can see is the top of your head, and I'd like to see who you are. There.
Well, I did it purposely because I'm the ugliest person in the world, and I would give all of you men heart attacks.
We're all surviving.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
In the Philadelphia area, for example, the P&W was the last line built following a water course out of Philadelphia. And the reason that you could follow that creek up to Bryn Mawr was you didn't have to worry so much about the grade. The railroad never went that way because it was a more heavily graded line between 69th Street and Bryn Mawr. And you could never go through Conshohocken, what's the station down there? where the P&W goes down into the valley and back up. You could not build that for steam railway operation.
Gulf Mills, you mean?
And it's a good example of how when you've got high horsepower equipment, you don't worry much about gradients. And that's why the P&W was the last one to get built, because it was the heaviest grade alignment. And Pennsy spent a lot of money building the West Philadelphia Railway, which bypassed the original line on a more roundabout routing to get the grade down. If you're running steam trains with thousands of tons in one little locomotive, you've got to be very conscious of grade. P&W, you don't. You know, you just go like hell. The N5s will go 70 miles an hour up at 2% grade. Well, they used to before the present bunch of people got hold of it.
We have a hiker-biker trail along what used to be the Washington and Old Dominion, which was steam and then urban, and then was diesel, and then it was scrapped for a highway.
Yep.
But what's interesting is I love walking on it. There's no grade. It's like walking on a high school track.
Yeah, it makes great trails.
Yeah. And
it's
when you remember
for a trail, because it's nicely graded.
And when you remember that it was 1853 when they started construction, 1859 when they opened up the first section, you didn't have much horsepower in those 440s.
Nope.
And of course, they were expecting big freight trains.
Yeah, they had it graded heavier up going west and lighter, I guess it was lighter grades going east, because they figured the coal traffic would need the lighter grades if they got to the coal fields.
Like the fractal grade where the original in Schuylkill County, it's 3.5%, but the loaded trains are going down at 3.5%, and the empties are going up.
Yeah. The original plan for the WNOD was to go to Harper's Ferry to intersect the Shenandoah Valley agricultural market. Later on, after the Civil War, they wanted to get into West Virginia and the coal mines.
Well, if you're going to go down 3 or 3.5% grade with a long freight train, you're going to do it very carefully.
There were derailments. There's old photographs that happened more than once.
Yep.
Coal everywhere.
You got it.
It still happens.
The Philadelphia Reading bragged when they were new that their route from the coal fields to West Falls, the worst grade against the loaded trains was level.
Wow.
They didn't mention the hill from West Falls up to Nicetown.
Anyway.
Mike, thank you again. I'm going to sign out, but a fabulous program. There were people here from other groups. I suspect you're going to be asked to do this elsewhere at some point.
Well, happy to do it. It's fun. It's fun to do the research and fun to present it. It's great.
Hey, Mike.
Thanks again, Mike.
Hey, Mike, how was the Reading connected to Doylestown? Because you didn't show Reading Railroad on there.
I didn't show any railroads.
Oh, okay, you purposely didn't show them. I thought maybe you said that there weren't any.
No, the Reading, well, very early on, actually, the North Penn Railroad branched off at Lansdale. You know, the main line went to Bethlehem, and the branch. So Doylestown was served very early on from the 1850s, and still is today.
Right.
Still.
And the Doylestown and Easton trolley originally started near the Reading Railroad train station.
Yes. In fact, they actually put they extended the trolley line into the yard when PTC stopped hauling the milk cars. They had to get their milk cars from Upper Bucks to market. So I have the blueprint. Actually, Dave Drinkhouse found it, and it comes down Clinton Street, and it went into the yard. And they were able to just, I guess, throw a plank down and roll the milk cans across onto the Reading to get it the rest of the way down. Oh. That was actually done. When I first saw it, I said, "Oh, look at this idea. I guess they never did that." And I was told, "No, they did it." 1923.
Mike, you showed a cut of the Philadelphia Rural Transit coaches that replaced the Doylestown trolley. Earlier, those same coaches were used by PRT to replace the Philadelphia and Easton trolleys.
Yes.
It's the 1932 PRT schedules mention their deluxe coaches on that route.
Yep. It wasn't until 1940 that the PR, it was an affiliate of the PRT.
Right.
They sold to Greyhound, but right at the start of World War II. So yeah, all through 20s and 30s, it was PRT equipment.
Well, what's amazing to me is that the last turnpike trolley was to Westchester, every foot of the way, with very few deviations. And when you see the film, there were places where it looked just like some of your Bucks County stuff with the track on the edge of the road. And amazingly, that thing ran until 1954.
Yeah.
The last turnpike trolley.
There's color movies of it, thanks to the 1950s.
Oh yeah, well, when I get the video
why
done,
Philadelphia and
when they get the video
why
done,
Philadelphia and Westchester bought stock in the Lancaster Turnpike. Were they going to build a branch out there?
When you see the film, you'll get a good. The guy that took these films had a 16mm camera mounted on a tripod.
Oh, all right.
And you'll get a good look at what that line was like right up until the 50s. And it's just amazing to think about that late in the game, you still had this roadside trolley zipping along at 50 miles an hour on its way to Westchester.
My mother-in-law and my father-in-law both rode it to Westchester to go to college every day.
Yeah.
I have to sign off. I want to thank you for making this available on Zoom, because I've been an East Penn member, grew up in Philadelphia for years, but I'm living in North Carolina now, and it's terrific to be able to tune in and hear all this talk. So thank you very much.
Second that motion.
Great.
Hey, Mike, can you put the information on how to buy your book in the newsletter?
Okay.
I didn't write that down, and that's very, very interesting.
Sure, I'll sign it, and I'll mail it.
The other thing you can do is you can look up Mike's last name under Arcadia Publishing, and it'll come right up.
Believe it or not, I have an author page on Amazon, but don't go there.
Okay.
Don't go to Amazon.
Don't like the reviews there?
Well, actually, I got a funny review. I got 4 good reviews, and I got 1 interesting review from someone who bought the book thinking it was about Montgomery County, Maryland. And and it's funny. It's actually, I could have taken it down. It's a little mad, but I left it because it's just funny. I mean, the guy's clearly pretty mad.
Yeah, I had a comment on one of my books about the size of the print from Arcadia too.
What about the print?
Well, that the print was small.
Okay. Oh, don't order the hardbound. I'm not sure if Bucks County is available as a hardbound, but Arcadia made a hardbound version of Montgomery County available for an extra $10, and it stinks. It's terrible. The paper is so freaking thin that you see, both sides looking at the front.
Yeah.
And they tried to get the way they tried to fix that is by putting an incredibly small amount of ink on the page, so there's no contrast. Also, you can see through the page, but it's got a hard cover. I bought it and actually returned it, and I told my editor, I said, "What the hell is with these stupid books? They're pathetic." Right. And she said, "Oh, it's on error control. It's some third party something or other." They made a bunch of excuses, but don't waste your money.
All right, I asked about that, and they said they didn't print them. So,
yeah,
Mike, this is Tom Lever. I got to go, but I just want to tell everybody I have your trolley books and thoroughly enjoyable. And tonight, Larry Loico came over, and him and I had dinner, and we went over the book beforehand, preparing for the show. And the show was wonderful. But the books, I'm telling everybody, buy the book. It's fantastic.
Yeah, they'll love it.
Thank you. Thanks for saying so. Hey, I found the review. The review on Amazon. It says, "No, stay away. This is not about the good people of Montgomery County, Maryland. This is about the hellbound scum from Pennsylvania. It is full of people with axes and pitchforks. How awful. I loved it there. I don't want to take it down because it's funny. I don't. Am I going to lose sales because of that? I doubt it.
Well, I'll let you know something, Mike, and it's really not so much about trolleys, but you know, I grew up in the anthracite coal regions, and that's another thing that I do a lot of research on. And it's just amazing what you find out. Even the federal government wrote a 41-volume set around 1900 that described all the different ethnic groups up there and how the Slavs were not white. The Jews were not white. The Irish were not white. That's the federal government. I mean, I'm making this up. And the newspapers are also loaded with this stuff. So it's funny, but I've heard this from things published 100 years ago, too.
Oh, yeah. It was the newspaper accounts, the newspapers, the published papers use racial slurs all the time in the paper. I mean, I read it. I'm like, what the heck? I'm just like, my eyes are bugging out. It was just part of the culture.
My housing development was built in 39, 40, and 41. And in everyone's deed, it
gotta
says,
go.
Everyone's deed says that you can't sell.
Oh, yeah.
To blacks, Jews, Chinese, etc.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And that was enforced by the government. The police would come in and throw you out.
Up until 1948, there was a Supreme Court ruling that said you're not allowed to uphold those deed restrictions anymore. So post-war.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a little shopping center to this day. And there used to be a brick wall. And it says, Arlington Forest, this is a restricted community. No, and it listed all the ethnic groups. They didn't list blacks because that was understood. You didn't have to say that.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's
George, I was in St. Clair.
It's not taught down. What's that? Oh no, we're talking about Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. I grew up in what's now the northern anthracite fields. Hazleton was the Middle Eastern fields. You know, you go over Shamokin, it's the western middle. Pottsville, Schuylkill County, where they still mine anthracite, is the southern fields.
And the southern fields there in St. Clair.
What's that?
We're walking through town, just trying to figure where we can route an on-road trail through town.
Oh,
and
okay.
Everywhere we looked, there's a church, and I realized there's a dozen churches in like 3 blocks because every nationality had their own church.
I've driven through that area, and I mean, St. Clair is really, the houses are teeny, but it's such a fascinating area, and the ethnic culture is still there. It's all over the place. And you're right, the churches really show you the ethnic groups that lived in St. Clair.
We're looking for rights of way to get trails through there. And so, of course, I want to know about the car lines. There's 2 lines to Pottsville.
Well, there were 2. There was one that went straight through over the Reading Railroad and down in. The other one went through Port Carbon and Palo Alto by the car house and came in a long way.
And the line to Frackville was built in 1915-16, and I'm still finding traces of that line. That was a major engineering feat. I mean, that's all rugged country, jumping back and forth over Mill Creek. It only ran for 11 years, from 16 to 27. That's the sad part.
Well, I wanted to ask, can I ask you about that, or can we chat about it?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because
not that I'm an expert. I'm learning about it every day. I'm learning
I
a little
know,
more.
but I never even knew I knew the Reading went out there. And I think you can see that. I never knew if the trolley line was actually part of 61, which of course is 2 levels.
No.
So it's on the other side of the creek, or?
It jumped back and forth. So you had the Pennsy, the Reading, the car line, and old and new 61. There's like 5 corridors all going up that.
Oh, wow. There. So if I'm going north on 61, it's actually down in there near the water course, making its way up to Frackville.
Right as you come out of North Clair or St. Clair going north, it was on the left side. And it crossed over in a little village, a little coal patch called Darkwater. It actually was a grade crossing right there. And from there on, it was on the right, and the highway was on the left. It jumped back and forth across Mill Creek because, the Pennsy and the Reading got there first. So they had to find whatever territory they could, scrounge here and there. But of course, their geometry could have sharper curves and all that. So it's really fascinating. And little by little, from the old valuation maps from 1917 of the Reading and highway department plans from the 20s and 30s, I'm piecing together exactly where the thing ran. It's really fun.
We'll have to talk someday. That's Schuylkill Railways that built that.
Yes.
Not the Eastern Pennsylvania Railways.
Right. You exchange cars at St. Clair.
At one time, I thought I saw their cars inside in Pottsville. I think they may.
See, they might have run through.
They did run through. Yeah.
Yeah. Companies like pointed at the Frankfurt, Tacony, and Holmesburg. They through routed with the Bristol company at times. Then they would stop, and then they would allow it again. You know, for a while they were running those cars up into Trenton, and then Trenton was like, "Hey, you don't have the right permits," and then they would stop them, and they would, you know,
yeah,
back and forth.
When they went out strike in '28, the line closed down. From what I could see, that was the only line making money from Monomoy City through Frackville and down into Pottsville, which would have been a county seat.
Yeah.
If you drive through that Schuylkill Railways line, it's on the other side of the mountain up the top of 61. You know, there really isn't much there now, but you can see where the car house was.
Oh, really?
In Gerard, is it Gerardville? I was able to see exactly where the car house was. I found a map. I mean, I probably can scan that and show you this. And I went and looked, and yeah, there it was. Not the building itself, but the open land was still there.
There's a 300-page book about all these lines written by Gene Gordon that's never been published. And I have like a little piece of the manuscript, but I don't know who has it.
Well, I tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened to me. I was researching this for a show for the Hoosier Traction. And I went up to the Historical Society up there. And they showed me the unpublished manuscript.
Oh, okay.
And I wasn't allowed to copy it because that was written by somebody. And I had to write a letter to Gene Gordon. I may still have that letter. I got permission to copy it. And the executive director at that time didn't look real happy. But I was able to make a copy of that manuscript. And I have a copy now in PTM because that'll never get published. I don't even know where it went. You know, so the Historical Society has it. I have it. And he covered Schuylkill Railways as well as Eastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That's a crying shame. That's a crying shame. He's a good author.
Unedited. You know, it's unedited. So, you know, somebody would have had to go through it.
It didn't need editing. He was good. I agree with Alan.
All the information is there, but you know, somebody would probably want to make sure that the spelling was all correct and that kind of thing. And
that sounds like
the thing that I found up there. This was an interesting story. There was like 80 maps. Somebody must have walked away with them when the last system closed. East Penn Transit, I think it was. And the 80 maps show the entire East Penn system. And they walked in about 5 years ago to the Pottsville, the Schuylkill Historical Society, and said, "Do you want them?" And they got them scanned.
Really?
Look at them. They're on 2 discs there.
Okay. That's good to know.
So, you know, I don't know that it shows all the roads or anything, but it really shows you how the whole system went.
This was in Pottsville.
In Pottsville, yeah.
Okay.
Which I don't think is really booking appointments right now, like some.
I know.
Places.
COVID messed everything up.
But it's there. It is there.
Okay.
So
I wonder if CERA would publish something like that. Some of the books they publish are a little bit more obscure than, say, Chicago or New York or Philadelphia.
You gotta find photographs. I don't know where Gene's photo collection went. I heard it went to a university somewhere in Maryland. I'm not really sure. I didn't hear.
He lived in Florida.
He's dead now. He died about 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. He was 90 or, you know, very close to one side or the other in 90.
Yeah, that's a crying shame that so much knowledge just disappears. No one, I understand, for example, that Kirkland wrote, of course, the diesel books. He had one on Alco and all that, but he finished one on GM and one on GE, and he died. And that was the end. The publisher didn't follow through. And we have no histories of GM or GE diesels. Let's be honest. And by waiting all these years, about half the story would have to be written. I mean, it only goes up to whenever it was that Kirkman stopped, finished them. These things are sad.
Well, it's still extant. You know, in 3 places that I know of.
Right.
Well, if somebody could tell that if somebody in the know could tell that to CERA, that might be something that they'd be looking for.
Well, you need pictures. That's an obscure system. Their trolleys were all gone by 1932. Schuylkill Railway, which was an adjoining system, was 28. Shamokin and Mont Carmel, which was a connection in Ashland, and that went in pieces. But the part from Ashland to Centralia and Mount Carmel went earlier than the rest of it. You know, I found pieces of that. I was up there doing a research on that, Shamokin and Mont Carmel. And, you know, I mean, I was able to figure out somewhat where the trolley went through Centralia, but there's signs all over Centralia saying you don't want to walk here. The ground can just open up.
Yeah.
And living in Scranton, I know that actually happened a number of times, and the houses would just go crashing in, even when I was alive.
Yeah, but it's a show you get cooked.
Yeah, but the last part, one nice source is in of trolley maps, but you have to kind of go and schmooze the guys. There's a couple of guys working in the state mine. It's a mine department, and it's in Pottsville, and it's right around the corner from the Historical Society. And they have thousands of maps scanned, and they're mining maps, but a number of these maps show the trolley line. And they were able to find for me the line that went from, it was a shuttle line that went from Mont Carmel down to Locust Gap, 2 miles, and actually ran longer than the regular trolley line because it was a separate line and had to go through the abandonment procedure separately.
Right.
And I looked for 3 years to find where in the hell did it leave the main line. When their map showed up, I realized there's 5 or 6 cemeteries in a row, and I'm looking in the wrong cemetery. And when I went over to the other side of where all these cemeteries were, lo and behold, boy, that looks like a trolley line. I went down around the hill and walked in, and you can't see it from the street. They've sort of got it blocked off. And then it's there. And that famous bridge that everybody shot their Barney fan trip picture, is the bridge is still there. And then behind it is piles of coal. And there's no track, of course, going up to the bridge. And down on the ground was a piece of wood. My wife thinks this is garbage. It's a piece of wood with a couple of holders for the overhead wire, and it's down the basement today.
Oh, nice.
No idea what the hell that is, of course. But I walked away with it.
You know what it is.
It was, you sure there's no termites in that? I don't think so. So, but yeah, you can still see parts of it. There's a Mount Carmel Historical Society that can talk about that. So you can still sort of, and I'll tell you what else was there, and I don't know what they did with it. Apparently you can see where the car house is now because that's gone, but the powerhouse next to it was uncovered. It was surrounded by trees. And, and when I drove by, it was uncovered. So you could sort of tell by looking at that where it was. Now, where the big heavy trestle and all was, railroads are all gone. You know, it's all filled in. They relocated a highway, and you can sort of, yeah, it's down in there somewhere, you know. But that's a fascinating area for to study streetcar operations. These little lines would go off during the Depression. And Gene Gordon, I think, had a ton of photos from those areas.
I think he did too, because they showed up here and there. It'll say Gene Gordon collection.
University, and if I can find out where, my guess is, and we're not making fun of college here, but until they get an intern and can actually accession it, you know, and say, this is what we have, maybe scan it. It's going to be like the Historical Society of Pennsylvania's PRT photos. They're going to remain in boxes. Somebody's going to say, yep, we have it.
Is there any particular
some of those boxes?
Is there any particular software that you guys use to catalog rail pictures?
I just try to make file names that have a lot of information in them. You know, it used to be we had 7.2 file names, like 7 digits. JPEG or whatever. Now that you can have longer, not infinitely long, but you know, I just try to keep them in folders and try to organize them that way. I don't have any special software for that, but I try to organize them because if they're not organized.
I think it's the American Museum Association has a Past Perfect software.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
I'm pretty
I didn't know if the rail fans use something different.
But I read something somewhere in trains. I inherited a whole bunch of old trains from the Trolley Museum when we had to move our archives. And these are all that famously smelly, mildewy thing. But I'm reading them before I get rid of them. And, you know, in 2008, when the software is still out there, somebody said they used Adobe Lightroom to catalog their photos. You can actually work on JPEGs within that too, but they said they used it. Yeah, and I'm sure there's other things too. You can probably research a whole bunch of stuff now on the internet.
You know, I think the model magazines like Trains and the major publishers, if you wrote to their editor and asked, I'll bet that they'd tell you how they do it.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, because every so often that's been a subject. I don't get trains on a regular basis, and I haven't gotten it for a year because I used to get it in a food store, and I'm staying away from that one now. But we're crazy in that store. But every so often there's talk about digital photography and storage, and you know, trying to figure out where your picture is.
The gentleman who wanted to know about the Washington Old Dominion.
That's me.
Yeah, and I live about 2 blocks from the trail.
Oh, whereabouts?
Alan,
are you the one I was getting the pictures from?
I'm sorry? I didn't give you any pictures.
Oh, okay, well, I bought some pictures from somebody here in Ashburn.
No, not me. No.
No, that was Chuck Wales. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. The Trail Authority has an archive, a museum of sorts at Aldie Mills in Virginia.
Right.
And that might be a source. And also, I believe there are 2 other books in addition to the Arcadia books in several editions. One is by Herbert Harwood.
Right.
And the other one is by, I believe, Williamson.
No, it's Ames Williams.
Ames Williams, I'm sorry. And that's about it. I don't know of any other book. Neither does our internet group on the WNOD. But you're welcome to join the internet group because every so often someone comes up with a new picture.
Yeah, no, actually, it's my group.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, speaking of the WOD, where did you,
Anyone mind if I share screen for just a second? This is St. Clair.
I was thinking that's
See the nice big radius there in the street?
Yeah.
2nd Street. That's the sort of thing, you know, it's the sort of thing, it's a dead giveaway. And then you turn this way.
Yeah. And that's where it was. There's 2 postcards out there that show it on 2nd Street, running right up to the end.
So the right is the short line and the left is the old long line to Mount Carbon. I mean, to Port Carbon.
You got to the end, and that's where, and then of course there was a railroad yard there, which none of that exists now.
It's the biggest yard in the world at the time.
The Schuylkill cars got off onto their own tracks, the Schuylkill Railway.
Yeah, but this is the sort of thing that, you know, people like us, we see that we're like, I know what that is, because. Yeah. Dead giveaway.
Yeah, well, there's people that think I'm nuts when I'm looking at the street.
Oh, those of you who were talking about the WNOD, which organization is this? The reason I'm interested is my brother lives in Vienna, and he's only a few blocks away from the WNOD, and he every once in a while sends me stuff about it.
I don't know if there's any, you know, really, there's not an organization per se. It's just the Groups.io has a group on it.
The interesting thing about Vienna is that the Washington, Virginia Railway, later it became Arlington Fairfax, paralleled it at the train station in Vienna. Northern Virginia was nothing.
Right.
And in the year 1900, let's be honest, nothing.
Happened.
And yet it had 2 electric railroads. It's amazing. Parallel, adjacent.
Yeah, I think.
The Washington, Virginia line stopped in Vienna and then went down to Fairfax City.
Right past the courthouse.
Yeah. I haven't really, I've seen I kind of know the direction it took, but I don't know exactly where the rails were. But that's the only time that the rail service to the Fairfax City.
Colonel American wrote a book called Old Dominion Trolley 2.
Right.
I believe CERA published it.
Oh, yeah.
At one point, it was so popular that at least in my area, it was selling for over $100 a copy. Used.
Wow.
So, but it's a wonderful book. And American died before he did the Baltimore and Annapolis. He did Washington, Baltimore, and Annapolis, but not the Baltimore and Annapolis. And that remains undone. Also, the Oak Ridge, which connected the WVNA to the Baltimore and Annapolis.
He's the one that wrote Every Hour on the Hour?
Yeah, that was the WVNA book.
Yeah.
Excellent book. Interestingly enough, Union troops saved Washington, D.C. They went by rail to Baltimore. There was no rail to Annapolis. They took a boat to Annapolis. They took an east-west line, I believe Oak Ridge or something like that, to the B&O and then into Washington just in time to save it from my guys, if you will, the Southerners, from moving into Washington. Fascinating.
Was this right after Bull Run?
Before.
Before?
Long before.
Okay.
And by the way, there never was a Battle of Bull Run. Everyone knows it's Manassas.
It's Manassas.
Yes.
I've been there, and it's really a very small battlefield.
I'm sorry?
It was really a very small battlefield.
You can walk first Manassas.
Maybe 30,000 on each side at the most. So we wandered into that by accident. My wife and I, with the kids, were heading somewhere on vacation, and maybe it was Virginia Beach. And of course, as soon as I saw Manassas, I said, we had to stop, and I got a grr, but we stopped. So
you can walk from the visitor center to about a dozen spots. The sign says go north here, and the whole battlefield's there. Second Manassas is much bigger, but First Manassas is one of the few battlefields of any consequence that you can actually walk.
Yeah, well, that's when everybody thought the war would be over in one battle.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah, they say that the local people there, they came out to watch the battle the way we would watch reenactments today. You know, it's a big festive thing. They figured.
Well, a lot of people came out of Washington. They were more the elite than the local people, but I'm sure the local people didn't like it when it was there. And didn't one house get destroyed? Wasn't there a woman in the house that artillery blew it up?
Well, the story I remember, I don't remember, but the story that I remember is that one of the men whose house got involved in the battle moved ways down south in Virginia to avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
The
McLean.
Yes, this is.
It was the McLean family.
Thank
and then, it was, some small out of the way town. And a few years later, some people came knocking at the door. We would like to use your house to arrange surrender terms, a General Grant and a General Lee, because they had moved to a little village called Appomattox.
Oh boy. Oh.
620,000 people, military, died in that war. And that was the 5th highest death toll in the history of the world for military deaths. 2 Latin American wars, and then obviously World War II, World War I were numbered 1 and 2. 3 and 4, Great Chaco War, and I've forgotten the other war. That was the one I'm forgetting is the name is when Bolivia took on 3 of its neighbors and lost most of its male population. But the Civil War was, more people died in that war than the US lost in all the other wars put together, including Vietnam.
I can believe it. Yeah. In fact, they said it actually did have an effect on the extent of the male population for a couple generations.
Well, that was Mormonism, actually. They got a big boost because there were a lot of women who were never going to find a husband.
Yeah, that's true. And it was interesting what you said about what you call the Battle of Manassas. It seems like both the Union and Confederacy had a different theme for naming battles and places. It seemed like the Confederates used the man-made geographic names, whereas the North tended to use natural features like creeks and hills and mountains.
Well, we call it Sharpsburg instead of Antietam. We call it Murfreesboro instead of Stone River.
Right.
Gettysburg was Gettysburg. And the Battle of Richmond-Petersburg was Richmond-Petersburg. We stuck more to the towns and the North stuck to the rivers. But,
yeah, in fact, even you had the armies. You had the Army of Northern Virginia.
Yes.
And the Army of the Potomac.
Yes. It's funny. My parents were in Europe. They went to see the Battle of Waterloo. And they remarked that if you didn't know anything about the Battle of Waterloo, and you just looked at the signs that were in English, you would have thought that the French won. That's what my dad said, so I don't know. But I still read about the Battle of Kursk, which was a great Soviet victory, in which American authors say that it was a German victory, which is crazy. So I don't know. The winners get to write the histories, I suppose.
What was the huge tank battle, wasn't it?
I'm sorry?
Huge tank battle.
Yes, sir. The Battle of Prokhorovka was the biggest tank battle in history. And actually, if you decide to start a war, there aren't enough tanks to duplicate the number of tanks that were in the Battle of Kursk. And there's stories that one side would lose 300 tanks in one day, which is an incredible amount.
Well, except the Germans couldn't replace theirs, and the T-34s were coming off the assembly lines like crazy.
It wasn't just that. They couldn't replace the tank experts. The software in the particular, as opposed to hardware, if you will. Same thing with pilots. And of course, the Japanese, this is far from streetcars in Pennsylvania, I'm sorry.
That's quite right. All right.
The Japanese started the war with 600 carrier pilots that were the best in the world by far. And when we killed the 600 pilots, that was the end of the war for the Japanese. Japanese lost 29 pilots, carrier pilots, Pearl Harbor, 40 when they went into the Indian Ocean to defeat the British, 40 operationally between the start of the war and Midway, 110 at Coral Sea, and 40 at Midway. That adds up to about 250 roughly. And when they got into the Battle of, the Guadalcanal campaign, that was the end.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was all their experienced pilots too.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they trained other people, and what did they know? They'd go up and it was a turkey shoot.
Well, that was the key. They trained 100 a year. And at the beginning, our Navy did the same thing, just a handful of incredibly good pilots. And then someone must have done some war games and realized that you're going to be losing pilots up the wazoo. So we had reasonably good pilots coming out of school. They had, in the tens of thousands, they had nothing. They were still doing 100 a year through the Battle of Midway. And by the time they got their head together, they're going to need 100 a week, 100 a month. They didn't have the fuel to do it. Same thing for the Germans. I apologize for changing the subject.
World War II is a lot of fun for the what ifs.
Oh yeah.
So many little things that could have twisted the outcome one way or the other.
Yeah, all through history, you could do what ifs all the way through history, and if you wanted to play games like that.
How about this one? There was a German national in Japan named Sorge. He was a communist. He told Stalin that Hitler was going to attack. Stalin said, go to hell. Hitler, I have an agreement with Hitler. He'll keep his promises. In October or so of 41, pardon me, at the end of 41, Sorge said that the Japanese were going to attack in Malaya and Indonesia and the Philippines, not going to attack in Siberia. The Japanese had attacked in Siberia in 39 and 40. This time Stalin believed him, took the troops from Siberia, and those were the troops that made the victories possible in the defense of Moscow. One man, one spy, that's all it was. And Stalin being Stalin, when the Japanese arrested Sorge, Stalin denied Sorge's existence as a spy. Sorge, of course, was hung.
Yeah, I was just
going to guess. And the Japanese, with a nice touch, executed him on May Day.
I spent 18 years in intelligence in the Air Force, and I had a tough time with others who are outside of my area of specialty, telling them that it only takes one to give away information that you're trying to protect. Just one. And we were working on a project at SAC for putting missiles on trains like the Soviets had. And they started talking about, well, what are we going to do to hide them? And I said, you guys got to understand there are historical societies that just study boxcars. And I said, all you do is get one train going down the track that looks different. And the internet was just starting in those days. And I said, that'll go all over the place, and guys will be running down with cameras to that track, knowing that that train is going to come up. And I said, all you need is one who's dirty, who's not an American patriot or American who's not going to go passing that on. And that message would be to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and it'd be in Moscow before the sun came up. And, I had, oh, well, Americans wouldn't do that. I said, all you need is one person, and that person could be foreign national. I just watched a show on, I think it was on Smithsonian last night, where they talked about the spy network that existed in the 1930s in the United States and Hawaii, and how the Japanese collected information on the Hawaiian Islands and the port facilities there. And there were British guys who were involved in that, who were helping out the Japanese. And it was a case of, there was this one guy that the FBI was tracking, and this one guy, there was another Japanese guy in Honolulu who was in their consulate, who used to rent a light plane and have them fly over Pearl Harbor, and he was up there with his camera shooting pictures. But this other guy was in the United States, and he operated a whole ring of spies on the West Coast, because the United States Naval Pacific Fleet was harbored in, I think, in the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
And they sent it to Hawaii in 1940. And this guy was living in the 30s there, and he had collected all kinds of photography and stuff of the harbors there. In other words, it only took one.
There's a story about the Norden bomb site, incredibly secret. Every bombardier was told that he was to destroy the bomb site. He was to die before, that was more important than saving his own life. And the bomb site was a vast improvement over anything anybody in the world had. Turns out that well before the war, well before 39, a German American worked for the company that built the Norden bomb site and sent the blueprints over to the Luftwaffe. And the Luftwaffe said, ours isn't as good, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper, so we'll just go with ours. All of that effort to destroy the bomb sites, which of course is kind of ridiculous because there were B-17s and B-24s that landed in Germany intact with all crew members. And the Germans flew those around to demonstrate to their fighter units the capabilities of our bombers. And when they built their 4-engine and 6-engine prototypes for bombers, they used the nose wheels of B-24s. But here was all this effort made, all these words by our security people. And the Germans had it on anyway. It's a great story.
Yeah.
Or we were lucky.
Well, I think I'm going to sign off. Mike, thanks again. In fact, this was the second time I saw your program, because I remember seeing it before at the Doylestown Historical Society in a Zoom feature.
Oh, this is a much better presentation. When I did the prior one for Doylestown Historical,
yeah,
I hadn't really done any research yet. In fact, that's why I did this book. What happened is I was signing copies of the Montgomery County book at the Barnes & Noble in Willow Grove, and these friendly people came down from Doylestown who I ended up being good friends with. They were interested in the car lines, and these people, they would do right-of-way chases. They didn't even know what it was called. They're like, "Oh, we're going to go look for this," and I'm like, "Man, on your own, we can help you with this." And they worked, they volunteered at Doylestown Historical, and they said, "Oh, do a presentation at Doylestown." So I did, just throwing together what I had, and then I realized, why don't I do an actual book? So the sad thing is that presentation was. This is a better one. There's a lot more stuff now,
Yeah, that's true. But I will definitely be ordering both books. I'll be going to your website and.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah,
okay,
I even package them up myself. I lovingly, put them in a Mylar envelope and tape it shut so if the mailman's in the rain, they don't get soaked.
Oh yes. Yeah.
I'll personally put it in the mail, and if it doesn't come or if it's damaged, what happened, I made the mistake of mailing some books out to people in the middle of December.
Oh.
It took 4 or 5 weeks for some people to get books, and I at least they got them. But man, where were those things sitting for a month? You know, it's like anyway.
I use
seems like it's working better
eBay,
now.
so I know all about the. Yeah, I've known all about that stuff.
So if you have any trouble at all, let me know, and I'll send. You know, I'll make sure you have a copy one way or the other.
Okay, well, thanks a lot then.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to sign off, but you want to hear a little funny track story
Sure.
to end it, because you showed me, some tracking. When I was a kid, I grew up in Philly, and one day I remember always got fascinated by the 26. My dad drove up to Fox Chase. All of a sudden, there's a track right in the side of the road. And never saw anything on it. For all I know, the line was quit. But years and years later, some of you remember Dennis Sabo?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, Dennis and I, become good friends at East Penn. And whenever I went down to Philly to take pictures, we'd wind up having 1 or 2 bull sessions and have a cheesesteak from Soxy's, which was up there, and smell the cigarette smoke and all that. One day I came out and he said, George, you're going to like this. You got to see this. And he drove down to the southern end of the 26 where the track had come off. Apparently it was still under there. Or some of that was still there, and there was rail. And so naturally I whipped out the camera and I had to take a couple shots of that. He calls me up the next morning and he's howling. He said, there was a crew out there paving, as if somebody had, called up and said some lawyer was taking a picture of this exposed track, They had covered it all over.
See what you did?
Yeah.
Believe it. That's a liability. Get rid of it.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But man, he was howling. And I came up that evening and, we had a look at it, and fresh paving all over it.
And at Pulaski Avenue, probably the south end of the 26.
It was on the southern end. I remember it was on the southern end. So where they came off.
Yeah, I knew Dennis.
Dennis was such a great guy.
I was over his house once. It was this nice old twin on Oxford Avenue.
Yeah.
With the foot-thick walls.
Yeah.
And that spot on Oxford Avenue with the tracks on the side of the road, I drive past that very often because I live only about a mile from there. And I live maybe about, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles. And yet sometimes at night with the windows open, I can hear the Fox Chase trains blowing for the crossing.
Yeah, it's. I can hear trains in North Wales here too late at night. I like that. It's a good thing. When they come down the Stony Creek branch, sometimes they blow for. I hear the ones on the SEPTA line all the time, but sometimes they come down the Stony Creek branch, and it's a different sound. It's.
Oh yeah.
But it's even interesting where I live, which is miles away from Pot Yard. And if the wind is blowing in the right direction, you can hear you can hear trains go by at what was once Pot Yard. It's amazing how far the whistles can travel.
And sometimes at night, late at night, I can hear trains on the New York Short Line go by, and just the wheels over the rail joints for quite a few minutes.
You'll just hear the clicking.
Yeah.
I rented an apartment for a short time on Afton Street.
Oh yeah.
In Fox Chase, and the apartment house was right on the edge of the cut, and it took me a while to get used to those trains. They go through there at 50 miles an hour, a long freight. They would knock it down. It was noisy. It was great.
Yes.
It took some getting used to. They were hauling through that cut. I guess they still do.
Yeah,
just arrow straight. This New York Short Line. It was that's what it was for.
When I was a graduate student at MIT, I lived in Central Square, Cambridge, at the YMCA. The housing at MIT is very limited, and it was on the second floor, facing Mass Ave, and there's a subway underneath, the Red Line. And it was kind of funny because I'd go to bed maybe 11 o'clock at night or something. I'd come back from my lab. I'd get back at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And as I was in the bed, I could feel very gently the vibration of the train coming through. It was really remarkable.
shaking the foundations of the building just slightly.
Just it didn't bother me. It
Yeah.
didn't keep me awake or anything like that. No complaints. Like,
the most amazing distance kind of noise like that I ever heard. I grew up in Audubon near Valley Forge Park, and we're several miles from the Reddings 4-track main line in the Schuylkill. And it's far. You could barely hear it. And one night I'm coming home from who knows where. I was living at home. And I hear a weird rattling sound in the backyard. It was a crystal clear night. It's probably in the teens. You know, it's like 1 a.m. And I hear a rattle, like it was a rhythmic rattling, and it was the old metal trash cans were just touching each other. And, you know, a brace of diesels miles away, because, you know, they're slightly out of sync, but then they'll get back in sync. And then things were rattling this can in my parents' backyard. You know, it was amazing. It was just because it was a still night. It was remarkable.
I lived
It's got to be like 3 or 4 miles in a straight line across the valley.
Once lived in an apartment 3 or 4 miles from Fort Myer. And at 5 o'clock, they shoot off a cannon. Sometimes you can hear it.
In fact, I'm to remind me, even today, I live maybe about a mile from a naval supply facility, and and at 4:30 every I guess weekday, I hear them play To the Colors over their PA system a mile away.
Yeah.
Those things are neat. Things you can set your watch by. They used to be very common.
Yeah, that was pretty much
church bells and all those things, and whistles at the factory, and
yeah, on military installations, that is pretty much standard. That's lowering of the colors.
Yeah.
Yes.
And and that goes back to the 1960s when I went into the service. So yeah, I just had 2 comments about the conversation you're making. Number one, if you want to waste your time, and I waste a lot of mine, there's a thing on the internet called virtual railfan, and they have these 24-hour-a-day cameras all around the United States. And you can sit there and watch. I can go on to Amtrak. Amtrak also has Where Is Your Train, or it's something like that. It's a website, and you can locate them. And since I know where the Lakeshore Limited goes from New York City to Chicago, there's 2 places I can watch it go through.
Wow.
And the Amtrak site will tell you if the train's behind time and all the rest of that. And there's one site called Fairport, New York, which is really good. And it's a YouTube kind of thing where you're going to get that sidebar where you can go to different places. It's amazing. And if you want to know what the American railroads are doing in terms of the economics of this country, just sit there and watch train after train go by. And at Fairport, there's one of those trackside devices to check the wheels, and it'll tell you the wheel count.
Oh, wow.
And so you divide that, take the engines off, which are 6 axles, divide that out, and then you can tell how many cars are on the trains. I had one train go by, it had 7 engines on it, and the wheel count was over 900. The axle count, I should say, was over 900.
You divide by 4.
And so that's one thing. So it's called virtual railfan. You just Google it and you'll find it.
It's dangerous information.
And it's free.
I don't
and
need
it's
to know
all
this.
over the country. One of the best places, Elkhart, Indiana. There's a great big rail yard there for Norfolk Southern, just outside of the station. The things at the station. The other one is Fort Madison, Iowa, where the Santa Fe has a swing bridge across the Mississippi River. And so you can see the swing bridge, the trains have to stop. And the bridge is owned by the Santa Fe, and they have a road across the top. So you got auto as well as trains.
Wow.
So it's fabulous. The other thing I just wanted to say shortly, if you want to know why I'm in trains, I was brought up in Woodside, New York.
behind our house was 6 tracks of the Long Island Railroad. 275,000 people rode past my house in the morning of a weekday, and in the evening, that same 275,000 people went eastbound back out onto Long Island. Across the street, behind the houses, of course, these were single-story row houses, behind there was the cutoff, the New Haven cutoff from Penn Station that went over towards the Hellgate Bridge. So I saw those, what do they call, EP3s and all of those up through, I got married in 71, so I moved out then, through the GG1s of Penn Central going up, you know, when they merged everything in the New Haven, a lot of the rectifiers left the New Haven. So if you want to know why I'm in trains, and I would go to sleep with the rattle of the trains and that, and those MP54s, all of that electric. This is a traction club, so I'm talking traction. There you go. Enough said.
John, you mentioned Sunnyside Gardens last time, right? Sunnyside Gardens?
No,
or the neighborhood in New York, Sunnyside Gardens?
It was near there.
Okay.
Yeah, my grandmother lived 10 blocks away, and across 43rd Street was the reverse curve going into Sunnyside Yard, where they would turn the whole trains around for the passenger servicing. And as a little boy, I'd stand there and look down at those tracks and watch train by train going by. A lot of the Florida trains were serviced there, and I think it was the Congressional that was New York to Washington, yeah. And the Senator went up to Boston. I'd see the Senator on the New Haven. They would change power and go up. So, yeah.
Neat.
I wish I had a good camera back in those days.
That loop track, that had 3 tracks.
That's
all
correct.
Wired. Is that right? Just check the movie. If you're interested in animation, you can see the location of and direction of every New York subway train, every Boston subway train, and every Washington subway train. And in San Francisco, when they run the streetcars under Market Street, they have the same thing with up to 3 different streetcars coupled together. I mean, I sit there sometimes and just look. It's kind of stupid, I admit. But, you know, I mean, what the hell does it matter, right? But I'll stand there transfixed for 5 minutes as these things are slowly moving. I'm not sure whether it's my love of trains or my respect for computers, considering I'm so old that I worked only with mainframes like 7094s in those days. And one more thing, this is my rant. When I talk to young people and I can joke with them when I can be, I say, you people don't have any idea how marvelous computers are today because of what we had to struggle with in the 60s. They have no idea.
Okay, well, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks again. It's been a long evening.
It is.
Yeah.
But
But
I
it's been
enjoyed
great, Mike. You did a wonderful. You'll be getting my order for books.
Oh, great. Happy to, thank you. Thanks very much.
The way I got your Montgomery County book, when I was doing I have a program on a Philadelphia subway, you know, building the subway, the trolley subway, although it's long, like a John Wayne movie, long and long-winded. But I was over scanning some stuff and visiting Springer, and Springer had just gotten your book. And I really didn't have the time to to get it. So he sold me his, and I guess he got it. And that was a fantastic book.
I'm glad you liked it.
Looking for the
If you say some more good things about your book, can you quit your job and write another one?
No, I got about 10 more years to work here.
Hey, Look, he's finding the trolley line that went up to Frackville. I need to see a map when he finds
it. It's sort of part of my job. That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, so it's important.
I'm piecing it together. It's interesting.
So Mike, we was it what we get on the square site to get your book?
Oh yes, please. Yeah.
All right. So you put that? Could you put that in the chat real quick?
Oh yes, good idea. I should have. Yeah. What was I thinking here? Yeah, that'd be a good idea. We do that right now.
Mike,
Mike, I posted on the chat a question for you. I'd like you to contact me privately if you would. I put my email on there on the chat.
All right. Let me cut and paste that there. I didn't notice it. Thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah, and we'll talk privately, communicate privately. Thanks again very much. I'm going to sign off too, and love the conversation, guys. I learned so much just listening to you. It's just terrific.
Well,
so thanks again.
To see you. It's good to see you.
I want to thank you, fellows. I'm an outsider from Virginia. I'm not a member. I'm not a modeler. I appreciate your hospitality and the education you provided me. I sincerely mean that. And I apologize for my diversions with World War II and the Civil War.
Oh, not at all. That is fascinating.
Join us, Sal.
Interesting, fascinating stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I was in elementary school, it was called the War of Northern Aggression.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. They're still probably calling it that in some places. So.
Without question. I've talked to one man, I won't mention his name so he doesn't get into trouble. He's the head of one of the historical societies in this old Confederacy. And I said, I noticed that you call it the war between the states. He says, that's because that's as close as I can get to the War of Northern Aggression.
Yeah.
He's still fighting it.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, one other question. I'll probably be signing off too. When you're following the line up to Frackville, is the Reading obviously had to cut off somewhere because of the grades. The Reading winds up in Frackville as well. But did the trolley line, as far as you can see right now, and your research indicates it stayed near the creek?
Yes.
It pretty much went straight up the valley.
Yeah, it would diverge from Route 61, but then it would come back. And at the south end of Frackville, I'm still trying to determine exactly where it ran on the south end of Frackville.
I tried to look for that. Can't find it.
Hard to tell. It's hard. I mean,
the interstate has really changed a lot of that.
Yeah, it bulldozed a lot of things. I actually bought both of the Arcadia books for Frackville, and there's not one trolley picture in either book. I'm like, yeah.
No,
so
there's probably not much at all in Frackville. I have not found a single postcard. I mean, I try to collect postcards, and I haven't found. In fact, I never saw the ones that you had, and they're marvelous. But I've never seen anything from that area. It's just one of these downtrodden coal areas, and nobody gave a shit. They were too busy picking coal off the Reading tracks, I guess.
And trying to evade the railroad detectives.
Now, on the other side, going down towards, it goes down and then up a hill again from the north side of Frackville. I have a distinct suspicion that the highway is pretty much on the trolley grade.
Yeah.
You drive down, it's kind of an S down into the valley. I'm pretty sure that's where it was there.
There are places where they did take over, and because it went out of service in 27, 28.
Yeah, 28.
And the 1940s when they really improved the road. So there's this right of way just waiting.
Yeah, it's right there. And it's perfectly graded. We're going to use it. Yeah, that side you can drive over it. You can sort of tell. And it did go under the Reading at that point. So if you find out where the Reading crossed over.
Oh, I know.
Under.
I got the Val maps for the Reading. I just got them a couple of days ago. Believe me, I'm absorbed in. Because when the car line comes close, they drew it.
Oh, really?
And I can even reverse engineer. I'm bringing them into CAD into scale, so I can reverse engineer the curves. I can see what degree curve they used.
Well, if you ever get done, I'd be fascinated to see this, because I've been able to. I really can't be walking through an area where there might be a lot of rattlesnakes and not even internet connections down in there. So.
Well, it's also state game lands. The top path from Darkwater up is state game lands, so you want to be wearing orange at the very least.
It won't stop the snakes, and there's plenty of them up there. So
that's good to know too. Well, this time of year, hopefully they're sleeping.
No, not right now, but we're not going anywhere right now. My wife's probably very correct. She's a doctor. And, you know, I've tried to get out of her town and go to Scranton once in a while, which is where I used to live. And she's like, you know, with your luck, what's going to happen is you're going to get into an accident and they'll take you to a crowded hospital where there's a lot of COVID. So
yeah,
she wants me to stay home until we're getting a vaccine. And, you know,
yeah, hopefully that's soon.
A vaccine is like seeing a master unit on the streets of Scranton right now.
A rarity.
In fact, she's told me that if, you know, I'm nearly 70 and I'm diabetic. So that makes me a victim.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Apparently diabetics usually have worse results. That's
right.
What the records show. And she
blood type
said,
matters too.
If I get a chance to get the Johnson & Johnson, which is, you know, is only about 55%, she said, get it. You can always get the other one later. The one 94%, but at least partly. So in the meantime, like I'm stuck in Allegheny County, you know, I go out once in a while, watch trains, but you know, gray days, black engines. Bleh.
Hey, George, is there, George?
Yeah.
Is there a good place to get railroad postcards?
I used to go to shows, which haven't happened entirely this year. And I always looked for the city ones in Pennsylvania that had streetcar in them. So I never really looked at railroad postcards. I'm not much of a railroad fan, although I loved the GG ones. You know, when I grew up in Philly, I was a block away from Luzerne Car House. And my dad was working for the post office back then. So, you know, you're going to laugh at this. I had a white rocking horse with a blue painted saddle and red trim, but, you know, the 55s and then the 20 cars would go up and down Old York Road. And then a lot of times I'd sneak down to the car barn, got my parents really pissed off. They knew right where to find me. They couldn't see me. They went down a block and there I was. My mom worked only in the morning and my dad, she got a train from somewhere. My dad would go to North Philly Station and I would sit there with him for an hour and a half or so waiting, and G's would come through and P5s. And I always wondered why all the MU cars went up. You know, you look south at North Philly and they were going up Cheston Hill Branch. Yeah. And my dad actually hated trains. I didn't know that. Saw one steam engine, probably a K4 from the Penn Ready, and he took me inside. He didn't want to get covered with smoke. But, you know, his railroad experience was that they go out and pick coal. They heat the house. And he would go, he said in the Taylor mine, it was a slope mine, and he would go down. There was only one guard. So he would go down in the tunnel and pick the stuff that went off the mine cars. My uncle would actually ride the top of the hopper cars and shovel it off, and then he'd have to go back and pick it all up. So he just could not stand trains. And the funny thing, when he was, Charlie, you might know that, you know a little more of Scranton. So when he died, I was a pallbearer, and he was at Chumpko's funeral home on Railroad Avenue. And of course, the Lackawanna, or now the Delaware Lackawanna, was behind it. And they're an all Alco railroad. And we're taking the coffin out to go to the hearse, you know. And this train came rumbling down behind, and for no reason at all. There's absolutely nothing back there. And it went, and I was like ready. I couldn't stop. I'm like biting my tongue because I didn't want to laugh at a funeral. You know, it's my dad's funeral. We put him in. Okay, now we're heading at the St. Michael's Ukrainian Orthodox Church. You go down Railroad Avenue, and we went at Bridge 60. Bridge 60 is where the D-L and W used to cross. The L's there now. We went under that, and there was an Alco on top of that. What do you think he does? Now I'm in my family car, and I just busted out, you know. My wife's doing the driving. I just busted out. My wife just can't figure out, why in the hell am I laughing? It's my dad's funeral. You know, because he hated these things, and they both blew for him.
Yeah.
You know, I just couldn't stand it the second time. But
one time maybe, but twice, really?
Yeah, twice, right? So like they're saying goodbye, good riddance, whatever. But he could never stand trains. He couldn't. Why the hell do you like these things? That's what he'd always say. You and your trains. Or he'd add a few words to that, but
it was a dangerous job. When you look at the old newspaper, you do the same stuff, the same kind of looking through old papers. People chopped up into pieces and killed and burned every day on the railroad.
Yeah.
All the time.
Well, you had
Dangerous.
the workers, you had all these people that were trespassing and hopping
Oh, yeah.
across the tracks.
All the time.
Get on the newspapers. If you have newspapers.com, I'm sure you do.
I
Get
do.
on there and start typing Laura Line accidents or the Laura Line third rail accidents. You're going to see some of the most horrible things that you're ever going to hear of.
The old newspapers were brutal. They told you every horrible detail more than nowadays. They don't do that. But in the old days, and also if you were badly injured, it would simply say so-and-so shall die. They just told you that you're not going to make it.
Well,
and it was in the paper.
What I saw in the papers on the Laura Line was, Vrata Mitzi, a well-known foreigner. That's how they put it. They have a Polish girl. They never gave you the name. The real sad one, and there was a hill overlooking the station in Pittston, and the kids, I guess, used to run down, and one kid ran down and he couldn't stop himself, and he tripped on the track and his head hit the third rail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know what's happening, and you're right, the papers are brutal. The third rail's burning his head through, and around the bend comes a train.
Oh.
Decapitates him. Now, how do you tell his mother that?
Yeah.
And one of the last ones I saw was on the Dunmore line, and this was sad too because some lady was crossing over the third rail. See, the Laura Line was built not to have many crossings. Yeah. Remember the high-speed railroad plan and 40-car freight trains and all that. So they had very few places to cross over or under. And so this lady was picking her way over the third rail. And of course, there's not much space between that. And what do you think she does? She drops her baby on the third rail. She's okay. And she's watched. I mean, the papers, I just went right through from 1903 up and it was like, oh my God, And then there were funny things, cows on the tracks. And I think they killed a dog or cow the first day. And
I was just looking up as we spoke here. Girardville, you mentioned Girardville Barn, and I had to look it up, and see this old newspaper account: beer keg versus trolley car, 1895. A guy vandalizes one of putting a beer keg on there, derails a trolley.
Well, that was a funny thing. That's funny.
That's funny.
There was
a lot of the stuff's not funny at all.
Some Laura Line guy that would, when he liked to collect fox skins, and every time they electrocuted a fox, he'd stop and get the fox and then skin it.
Yeah.
But cows you're full of papers like saying, well, cow turns into roast beef, hits the third rail, But then there was the other side of it, which is very sad to read.
Right.
Well, thank you for the evening. I'm going to check off.
In fact, how the freight service ended so quickly. It was a Wednesday. They were, I think, the 19th of August, and they always had two trains, a morning and afternoon train. And they ran the morning train, third rail, electrified. And then somebody picked up a copy of one of the local newspapers, and it said the Laura Line has closed down, and everybody went into a panic because it made it look like the third rail was dead. And of course, they're still waiting to run the afternoon train. So the leased diesel actually had to come out half a day early. They were going to lease diesels from the DL&W, but they had to bring that diesel out, little 44 tonner named number 51, out in the afternoon because they were worried everybody was going to be stepping on the third rail. That's the paper seemed to indicate. It didn't say it would be done tonight, or it indicated it would be done now.
Right.
So anybody who's out there looking for a photo of that last freight, too bad.
Good night, all.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's great to see you. Look forward to next week, next month.
Same here. All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night now.